Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Ming of Revolution. And Trump sends the military to fight the cartels and into the streets of America. Before we get into that, let's be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, I love the military whooping on the cartels. But if they whooping on the blacks in the community in the street, we're getting all of that.
What's up, guys? D7 checking in with you. And we got some developments here in terms of what's popping off at the southern border. We've been waiting for this. We've been waiting to see what they're going to do. On day one, Trump said, we're under a national emergency. Everybody said, why? He cited the cartels and everything going on with the southern border as the reason. Since they've been mobilizing quietly and they've militarized 2/3 of our border. There's camps down there as well. Camps that most of these illegals aren't even seeing because the illegals are getting shipped out straight to a destination. We have basically Jade Helm unfolding right in front of us right now with troops all over the place. All it would take is a real pandemic, real lockdowns, and the biggest nightmare of your life will begin.
Revolutionary salute.
All these guys going around rounding up illegals, they've been rounding up anyone that doesn't comply. Right? So now it looks like the next phase begins. They are saying that they're flying the Poseidons, that they're moving military, Marines, thousands down into the theater. They're calling this a theater now of the Caribbean and Latin America. So whenever they start using these terms, calling it a theater, well, they're ready to set up shop for war. They have sent ships. They have sent...
all this is distraction. They really want to see the Venezuelan oil and the oil in Guyana. Still all that great oil, especially with Venezuela. They got more than Saudi Arabia. They just labeled Nicolas Maduro, remember that, a drug trafficker, and they saying he bigger than Pablo Escobar. El Chapo don't got nothing on him. Now Trump is saying the military needs to go fight drug traffickers in Latin America. They are going towards Venezuela.
Destroyers to position. It's about to go down. Get ready. This is going to change things. We will officially be at war. It will begin. And you'd be crazy to think that you're not going to see any blowback. We've already seen,
because they don't know how to fight guerrilla
action down there at the border. Someone's lost their life in an attack and everything else, but people just are not paying attention. So as soon as they start to strike these cartels, there's going to be blowback. There's going to be hits in different areas you watch, and it all begins. So they've got all this stuff in motion right now. Now, you've also got to pay attention to some of the things that they're using. Drones are going to start to be used as weapons, just as you see in Ukraine. You got to start practicing and getting hip on how to take these things out of the sky, those that are deemed a threat. There's a new company out there that's making these little turrets that will take them down out of the sky for cheap, basically in a military type of situation. And you also have these vans that South Korea is talking about, and others are displaying out here, these box trucks and vehicles that are just pulling up, and they're launching missiles out of them. I'll attach an image of that. I'll leave some links so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Full scale here. But this begins. I would get ready because there's going to be blowback, and this changes everything. This puts America, literally our soil, our southern border, on the front lines of a war, full scale, with the military everywhere, with drone strikes going down. So heads up, man. It looks like it's the next level for sure here. I'm going to leave links. Join me on the live stream.
16th, and President Trump deploying 4,000 U.S. Marines to Latin America, bolstering U.S. Southern Command to prepare for their Operation Eradicate the Drug Cartels. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum not happy. Democrats, for some reason, not happy at all. Why? How can you not support eradicating drug cartels? This is really one of those issues where Democrats would be better off just helping Trump accomplish this. Instead, they're rooting for the drug cartels. That's what it looks like. We'll show you. It's nuts.
New York Times reports President Trump has secretly ordered the Pentagon to conduct military actions against some Latin American drug cartels. This after the administration branded several as terrorist organizations. Olivia Rinaldi is back with me now at the desk. So good to have you here. I want to play for you sound from Secretary of State Marco Rubio about the necessity of the designation and what it might imply about future military involvement. Let's listen.
We cannot continue to just treat these guys as local street gangs. They have weaponry that looks like what terrorists, in some cases, armies have. They control territory in many cases. Those cartels extend from the Maduro regime in Venezuela, which is not a legitimate government. We don't recognize the Maduro regime as legitimate. It is a criminal enterprise, all the way to the various different cartels that operate in Mexico. And in between, you find them in Ecuador, you find them in Guatemala, right. You find TDA, what people would call street gangs, but actually are operating as criminal enterprises.
Mexico's president today, Claudia Sheinbaum, said America's not coming to Mexico.
America's not coming to Mexico. Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. President Trump deploying 4,000 more U.S. Marines to Latin American waters in order to fight the drug cartels. This move, part of the Trump administration's strategy to ready the military to target these cartels, specific cartels, with kinetic force. This has been in motion for weeks. This latest deployment, Pentagon officials say, is aimed at addressing threats to U.S. national security from specifically designated narco-terror organizations in the region. The deployment includes the Jim Amphibious Ready Group and the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, both reporting to U.S. Southern Command. Additionally, they'll have P-8 recon aircraft, nuclear-powered submarines, multiple destroyers, and a guided missile cruiser at their disposal. The Pentagon officials telling CNN that the buildup is intended as a show of force, but will also allow the U.S. more options should President Trump give the strike order, give the green light to strike these cartel positions. Something we know Trump isn't scared to do. If he believes it's the right thing to do, he'll give the order. We saw him do that with Iran, which was a much harder target, a much more risky operation. And he's of the belief it's necessary to flex U.S. military might. He did so yesterday, flying F-22s and the B-2 stealth bomber right over Putin's head.
Over Putin's head.
The press asking President Trump about this. Trump saying, which cartels are you talking about? Latin America, they have a lot of drug cartels, lots of drugs flowing through that region. But look, we have to protect our country. Watch.
We're talking about sending military forces to fight against the drug cartels in Latin America. Do you think it's worth sending our forces, our U.S. forces there to take this on?
Cartels where?
Central Latin America.
Well, Latin America's got a lot of cartels. They've got a lot of drugs flowing. So, we want to protect our country. We have to protect our country. We haven't been doing it for 4 years. And we love this country like they love their countries. We have to protect our country. So, we're playing a tough game.
All of this coming after the new executive order Trump signed last week, authorizing the Pentagon to use military force on cartel positions that are killing Americans. Multiple outlets now reporting Trump's moving all the pieces into place to get this done. He signed an EO months ago, designating the drug cartels as foreign terror organizations. That original order setting all this in motion. This was all part of the plan. Watch.
This is actually an executive order designating the cartels and other organizations to be foreign terrorist organizations.
That's a big one.
Yes, sir.
People have wanted to do this for years. So they are now designated as terrorist organizations, foreign. And Mexico probably doesn't want that. But we have to do what's right. They're killing our people. They're killing 250, 300,000 American people a year, not 100, like has been reported for 15 years. It's probably 300,000.
Then last week's order granting the Pentagon the authority to strike cartel positions. The details of that order are still classified, so we don't know exactly what it says. We don't know if there's limitations on that or if the Pentagon still needs Trump's final approval. Regardless, Mexico not happy at all about this, trying to reassure Mexico that there will be no U.S. invasion into her country. Claudia Sheinbaum, Mexico's president, saying these operations will only happen on U.S. soil. Watch.
Yes, but it has nothing to do with Mexican territory. It has to do with their country. It does not involve our territory.
So it would be within the United States?
Within the United States. Exactly.
Yeah, definitely not the case. I don't see any chance Trump launching drone strikes on U.S. soil, and Mexico apparently figuring this out. The U.S. now deadly serious about this. The cartels' time is probably up, and we know this because under mounting pressure from President Trump, Mexico a few days ago transferring 26 suspected cartel members to the U.S. These are Mexican nationals, most of them, in Mexican custody that the Mexican government just gave over to the U.S., all wanted on drug trafficking charges, trying to appease the Trump administration. The CIA has even been secretly flying MQ-9 Reaper drones over Mexico for months. They've been tracking these cartel networks for months now, tracking their comings, their goings, their hotspots, their strongholds. They started this like 5 months ago, back in February. It's very likely at this point, the CIA has the entire country mapped out. They know exactly where to hit if Trump were to give the order. They could probably eliminate the entire Jalisco cartel in a single night. Democrats losing their minds over this, trying to portray this as Trump invading a sovereign country, bombing Mexico. Trump's going to bomb Mexico, calling this an illegal invasion of a sovereign country. No, this wouldn't be illegal technically. These cartels are now designated terror organizations, the same way that Al-Qaeda is. Nevertheless, this is what we're going to start to hear, that Trump's invading Mexico. They're going to call for his impeachment over this, probably even his arrest. Mark my words. Let me know what you think about this. Should Trump do this, move forward, give the order, use military force to permanently eliminate these cartels, the command and control structure of these major drug cartels? And remember, this isn't a war on drugs. This is a war on trafficking, drug trafficking, human trafficking, child trafficking. That's what these cartels do. They've worked as the security structure for these NGOs who've organized the tens of millions of illegals who flowed into our country over the last 5 years. Let me know what you think about this. Is it time to end their reign for good? In another story, President Trump speaking last night after his Alaska summit with President Putin, dodging questions about the details of the meeting, about the agreement that they allegedly reached or are getting close to reaching, pivoting instead during this interview to mail-in voting and announcing he will be moving to outlaw mail-in voting before the next election. Watch this.
You have mail-in voting. He said mail-in voting every election. He said no country has mail-in voting. It's impossible to have mail-in voting and have honest elections. And he said that to me. It was very interesting because we talked about 2020. He said, you won that election by so much. And that's how he got it. He said, and if you would have won, we wouldn't have had a war. You'd have all these millions of people alive now instead of dead. And he said, and you lost it because of mail-in voting. It was a rigged election. But mail-in voting, Sean, the politicians, I think I'm going to make it a big, I know the answer is that Jimmy Carter, years ago, along with Scoop Jackson and some others, they had a committee, respected people, good committee, Jimmy Carter, good guy. You know, he's a good man.
Bullshit.
And the conclusion was you can't have mail-in voting. We have mail-in voting. It's so dishonest. They send stuff. Some people get 7 ballots. Look at California with that horrible governor they have. He's one of the worst governors in history. He's incompetent. He doesn't know what he's doing. They send out like 38 million ballots. Some people get 5, 6, 7. But Vladimir Putin, smart guy, said you can't have an honest election with mail-in voting. And he said there's not a country in the world that uses it now.
Oh, I would love to see election reform.
We have to do it. I don't know why we're not doing it.
No, I'd
and
like
you
to
bring it up. The Democrats
Voter
don't
ID?
want it. Look, the Republicans want it, but not strongly enough. I mean, they got to want it strong because it can't be honest. It goes through a postman. It goes through somebody else. You know, when you go to a really well-run voting booth, you go in, you have to hand a card, a picture, or this or that. You don't have everything perfect. You get sent back, go get it. It's very hard to do something fraudulent with a vote.
paper ballots.
Mail-in voting, they give you boxes of stuff. You have no idea where they came from. This mail-in voting, you can't have a great democracy, republic. You can't have it. Well, maybe that's why we're going to end up with a communist mayor in New York. I don't know. He probably is very happy with mail-in ballot. But you can't have a great democracy with mail-in voting.
Voter ID, signature verification, chain of custody controls, updated voter rolls, partisan observers watching the voting all day, the vote counting all night. You do paper ballots, you pick a winner, and everyone goes home with confidence in the integrity.
For 10% of the cost.
Yeah.
So if you do paper ballots, it costs you 10% the cost of machines.
This is something personally I totally agree should be outlawed. Think about when you move, right?
Well, the New York Times is reporting that President Trump secretly signed a directive to the Pentagon to begin using military force against certain Latin America drug cartels. There's no sourcing in this story, so we're going to take it with a grain of salt because it is the New York Times after all. But is there any truth to this? Would the U.S. launch ground forces against the cartels? Drone strikes maybe on drug labs, maybe carry out missions on cartel leaders. We don't know what this means. It literally could be anything. We know the cartels are very sophisticated. We know they have drones. We know they have tracking software. Is this a war we're even prepared for? The Times said this is tricky because it would raise legal issues, including whether it would count as murder if U.S. forces acting outside of a congressionally authorized armed conflict were to kill civilians who pose no imminent threat, to which I said, LOL. Ever heard of Syria?
People not paying attention to. I'm going to have to do a whole video just specifically about this to let the streets be aware, to everybody out there pushing their poison. Because what they're not paying attention to, Trump done already labeled the cartels as terrorist organizations. He already did that. So what happens when you help fund and give money to a terrorist organization? Well, you are arrested and you're charged with helping fund and assist terrorism. Like if you were to try to send some money to Al-Qaeda or ISIS, they lock your ass up. So for anybody selling drugs, if you got dope, you got crack, you got anything Trump say come from the cartels, now they can hit your ass with funding terrorism. That's a fact. Now you're funding terrorism. You assisting the terrorists that he's saying is killing hundreds of thousands of people. That fentanyl is killing a lot of people. But you see what he's doing? So people not even paying attention to what's going to go on in America.
Syria, Yemen, Panama City, Afghanistan. What makes this a concern all of a sudden? I don't understand, but okay, yes, that.
He in the streets, he even hit DC, LA, even hit these major cities. Yeah. Because he already rolling out the plan that they is assisting terrorists. That's part of it. And then all these dummies online talking about they got cartel plugs, they fuck with the cartel. Can you all right keep saying that?
should have always been a concern. I'm with you on that. Now, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum says, no way to this. Absolutely not. No U.S. forces will step foot in Mexico to go after these gangs. Is that because she's on this one? She's handling it?
Yeah, right. Okay.
She's got this? Well, go ahead.
Yeah, Auden Cabello joins us now. He's an independent journalist who's been covering the cartel wars and U.S. involvement. And, we've been covering it here on the show quite extensively. Welcome to the show. And, we hear regularly that no one in the Mexican government is separate from the cartels. So is that why Claudia Sheinbaum is saying no to American forces here? Because these are the people that butter her bread, so to speak?
Well, it's great to be with you, and absolutely, that's one of the things that have evolved throughout the years. Is that at one point, cartels were local, regional, and now they've evolved to the point where they're intermarried with political parties. They're one and the same, and that's why you see Claudia Sheinbaum defend them the way she does. Is because to go after the cartels is to go after the corruption and the politics in Mexico. And it's one of her arguments is that the U.S. would be invading Mexican sovereignty. And there's some of those that have been arguing, well, what about the sovereignty? Where was the sovereignty when, Venezuela is in Mexico or Iran and other countries are using Mexico as a springboard to operate into the U.S., whether it's spying or with cartels. There's reports already about other countries operating with the cartels in Mexico, providing technical know-how as far as like the drones you mentioned, armed with IEDs that cartels are infighting using these drones, and now they're being used at the border to supervise or monitor law enforcement. It could be, the day could come where these drones are used against law enforcement, U.S. law enforcement. And so that's the whole argument as far as how intertwined cartels are with politicians in Mexico. And I think it's going to take more for the Trump administration than drone strikes or have intelligence on the ground. I know you had my colleague Todd Bensman a few months ago, who's now with Tom Homan on the Trump administration, talking about ICE agents now getting intelligence in Mexico and with these drones spying over Mexico. I think it's going to take way more than that to really battle these cartels. Somehow the Trump administration is going to have to drive a wedge between cartels and politicians, and also on the cultural front, which, by the way, they're doing a great job on that front by revoking visas to artists that are talking about and glamorizing the cartel lifestyle, even corrupt politicians, either at the state level where the mayors, governors, they're revoking these visas, and it's causing repercussions in Mexico, where now they're turning against each other. And so it's a hard task at hand, but nothing impossible, nothing that the Trump administration can't do.
People are locking in their winter gear right now. And have you guys heard of Bearskin, the Bearskin hoodie? I love these guys. Smart people are locking in their winter gear right now because this is hands down the best time to prep for the coming winter. Bearskin is running a 60% off sale right now if you watch our show, and you can get your hoodie early. That's right. This hoodie is built like a tank. 340 GSM micro fleece, has 10 pockets, clear valve, and you'll get a link sent straight to your skin right now. 60% off. Text the word redacted to 36912.
So what do you think of this prospect? I saw an article you had tweeted about how we are preparing for the wrong war because we're not really it's more likely that we would go to war with Mexico than Russia, and we are not prepared for that. So is there any path to success in a war against the cartels?
I think there is, but it has to be on different fronts, not just on economic front, whether with tariffs or diplomatically, revoking visas. I think culturally, that's also a front that has to be approached, and of course, militarily, and not the military strikes that we're all thinking about. Maybe drone strikes on the labs. I think it's going to be more complex than that. Like I said, the drones are already being used to monitor law enforcement on the U.S. side and being armed with IEDs and used against each other in Mexico. And so I think we talk about the border wall. I think cartels are now moving into sea and underground. Here pretty soon we'll be hearing more about tunnels being used to transport drugs. But now, as we mentioned with these drones, now they're going into the air. So I think it's a multifaceted front, not only with military strikes, but I think like I said, culturally, diplomatically, on every front. At this point, Mexico is pretty much lost, and I don't think internally they'll be able to combat the cartels. I think it'll be an external force, and who other than the United States to help Mexico out.
But then what?
One of our viewers says, Go Blue Forever says, we would need more than just special operations. Send the Marines as well. U.S. Air Force, Navy, airstrikes on compounds. I mean, look, I'm vehemently anti-war. I want to say that. I'm vehemently anti-imperialism, anti the United States invading other countries. That's what our whole show is about. But when we are being invaded by these cartels in the United States, I mean, we are technically at war with these cartels, are we not?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, I spent 8 years on the border, living on the Mexican side, covering the border crisis under the Biden administration and covering it from the Mexican side. The whole focus was on the what we call the give-ups, or those seeking asylum, like the Venezuelans and Cubans, Haitians, that would look for Border Patrol and turn themselves in. And while that was happening, we lost sight of the gotaways, mainly Mexican nationals that were sneaking into the country, and which, by the way, they're still doing. I know we focus on Trump's success of the 94% that he's stopped at the border, but I focus on the 6%. Like, who are they? And for the most part, they're the Mexican nationals, the gotaways that are avoiding law enforcement. They're still happening in remote areas here in Texas, whether it's in the Big Bend sector or the Rio Grande Valley. And amongst those are cartel operatives that now they're operating within the United States. They made it in under the Biden administration, and now they're fully operational here in the United States. And so I think this front is not only to go into Mexico, but also here inland, is to combat them here internally. And I know it's rarely reported on, but some of them are even within our law enforcement, our government. And so I think it's a long battle, but like I said, it's possible, and we need a clean house here first, and then take that into Mexico somehow, and drive that wedge between cartels and the corruption in Mexico.
Now, when Claudia Sheinbaum uses this strong language, like absolutely not, you cannot invade Mexico, we would consider this an invasion, there is part of me that I'm embarrassed to admit is like, so what? We did that in Syria. We did that in Iraq. We can do what we want. And this is, I like I said, that's not a good attitude to have. But who the heck would stop us?
Well,
right?
Iraq wasn't invading us. Syria wasn't invading us. These are the wars that we go out and we kill millions of people, and they weren't doing anything to us. But here you literally have them doing something to us. So
right. So my question is, we do what we want. Is who would condemn us if we actually did on the basis, the valid basis that we are being invaded?
Israel.
Exactly. So that's a great question. And the answer is, I mean, even if you look, I still have family in Mexico, and I have colleagues, friends, I have business owners, and they're all for Trump, as they say, invading Mexico, because at this point, they feel completely lost. They don't trust the government.
Yeah.
It's like everybody's corrupt. And so if anybody, it's going to be Trump. And they tell me, maybe perhaps after this interview, or every time I do an interview, they'll send me a message and say, if you can, reach out to Trump people and tell them that we support him in invading Mexico and helping us out, because we don't trust our government anymore. They're all corrupt, and they're not going to help us. And so to your point, to your question, I think you're exactly right. I mean, what's to stop the United States to go after these cartels?
Unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, someone in the chat says, "Oh, so Clayton, then you're a P word. You're a wimp for not wanting to invade other countries." No. I don't want to invade other countries. But when another country that's on our border is literally invading us, and putting the crime and destruction and the rape and the child trafficking and the drugs into the United States of America. That is a national security issue. But Iraq wasn't invading us, so I see strong differences there. Auden, great having you on the show. A real treat to have you here. Excellent work, and really appreciate your thoughts on this. We'll have you back real soon.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As the National Guard expands its presence in Washington, D.C., President Trump says he'll seek long-term federal takeover of the D.C. police force.
We're going to need a crime bill that we're going to be putting in, and it's going to pertain initially to D.C. We're going to use it as a very positive example. And we're going to be asking for extensions on that, long-term extensions, because you can't have 30 days. 30 days that's by the time you do it. We're going to have this in good shape.
Earlier this week, Trump declared a crime emergency in D.C., even though violent crime in the city is at its 30-year low. Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has denounced Trump's takeover of the police force as an authoritarian push. At least 800 National Guard troops are being deployed in D.C. alongside 500 federal law enforcement.
And the man don't need to be using the military to take over cities, but to say that crime is down is a damn lie. We got the evidence and all that. They've been cooking the books. Shame on the police who been cooking the damn books while the black people in the community know goddamn well crime haven't been down. They've been lying, pretending like it's been down.
Agents. The Washington Post revealed Tuesday the Trump administration is also planning a so-called domestic civil disturbance quick reaction force composed of hundreds of National Guard troops set to rapidly deploy to other U.S. cities targeted by Trump, including Democratic strongholds of Baltimore, New York, Chicago, Oakland. The force would be comprised of two groups of 300 soldiers permanently assigned to the force stationed at military bases in Alabama and Arizona. This comes after Trump earlier deployed the National Guard and U.S. Marines to Los Angeles during protests against immigration raids and arrests by masked, unidentified agents who also targeted U.S. citizens when they were making their arrests. Rolling Stone reports, quote, one of Trump's biggest regrets from his first term in the Oval Office, according to former and current senior Trump advisors, is that he didn't use military forces and other federal assets to crack down harder than he ultimately did in the summer of 2020 on racial justice protests. Trump's Secretary of Defense at the time did not agree with the president's idea to shoot Black Lives Matter protesters near the White House. Meanwhile, earlier this week, Trump secretly signed a directive approving the Pentagon's use of military force on foreign soil to target drug cartels, especially in countries like Mexico. All of this comes as Trump is due to meet Friday with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska to discuss a ceasefire in Ukraine, where the U.S. has also sent troops. Today, we take a rare look at U.S. special forces deployed around the world, whether we're talking about Mexico, Ukraine, Iraq, Afghanistan, or here at home. They're stationed at the most populous military base in the country, which was renamed Fort Liberty in 2023, until Trump's defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, directed the Army to change the name back to Fort Bragg, saying, Bragg is back. Fort Bragg is home to Delta Force, the most secretive black ops unit in the military, which carries out classified assassinations and other clandestine missions and is also heavily involved in drug trafficking, as our next guest reveals in his new book. Rolling Stone investigative reporter Seth Harp is a foreign correspondent who's reported from Iraq, Mexico, Syria, and Ukraine, also an Iraq War veteran. His new book, out this week, is titled The Fort Bragg Cartel, Drug Trafficking and Murder in the Special Forces. I don't think people usually expect to see, when talking about a cartel, the largest U.S. military base, Fort Bragg. So if you can talk about drug trafficking and murder in the Special Forces, begin with what Fort Bragg is, who the Special Forces are, especially Delta Forces, and who these dead bodies are that are turning up all over Fort Bragg and the surrounding area.
Well, Trump says he wants to deploy military forces to countries like Mexico to crack down on drug cartels there. But I think he should look closer to home because there's at least 14 cases that I'm tracking of Fort Bragg trained soldiers who have been either arrested, apprehended, or killed in the course of trafficking drugs in the last 5 years or so, often in conjunction with those very same Mexican drug cartels. This is especially concerning because of what Fort Bragg is. It's not only the largest U.S. military base, but it's central to U.S. operations and special operations. It's the home of the 82nd Airborne Division, which is the United States' main contingency force. It's also the headquarters of the Green Berets, the Special Forces, as well as the Joint Special Operations Command, which includes Delta Force, which is the most—
JSOC.
That's JSOC. That's the most secretive and elite component of the U.S. military. And as you said, there have been some members of Delta Force who have been involved in trafficking drugs recently.
So you begin this book with the discovery of 2 bodies. Tell us when they were discovered and who those men were.
In December of 2020, 2 dead bodies were found on a remote training range at Fort Bragg. One of them was a member of Delta Force. They had both been shot to death. And the limited information from police at that time was that it was believed to be a double homicide from a drug deal gone wrong. The other person who was killed at that time was Timothy Dumas, who was a support officer, a logistics officer for JSOC. The other one, the Delta Force operator, his name was Billy Levine. And my book mostly is, or at the core of it, it's an investigation into who committed these murders.
So Billy Levine, Delta Force. Talk about the Delta Force operations, and you just mentioned that people are being killed in Fort Bragg, and part of the killing responsibility is the Mexican drug cartels. But those cartels, you talk about being trained at Fort Bragg?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's unclear who committed the murders of Billy Levine and Timothy Dumas, I've got to say. Certainly, we might suspect that it could have been some of their associates in the drug trafficking industry. I did learn in the course of researching the book and reporting it that Levine and Dumas were buying cocaine through the Los Zetas cartel in Mexico, which in fact was trained in the United States. It began as a project, a joint project between the U.S. Special Forces and the Mexican government to create an elite paratrooper unit of the Mexican army, and later went rogue and became one of the most feared cartels in Mexico.
So you're talking about a kind of Mexico Delta Force.
They didn't go wrong.
You could say that.
It was trained for.
You could say that, or Mexican Green Berets.
The numbers that you're talking about of soldiers who have died at Fort Bragg, in a couple years, over 100?
109 from 2020 to 2021. And only 4 of those deaths took place in foreign combat zones in Afghanistan and Syria. All the rest took place stateside, either on Fort Bragg itself or in Fayetteville, which is the town right by Fort Bragg.
So can you talk about, with this number of deaths, how does it compare, for example, to Fort Hood? And talk about what happens when you have this massive number of deaths. Who is held responsible and how are they dying?
Well, so far, nobody has been held responsible. Fort Bragg is the largest military base. However, the number of deaths there on a per capita and absolute basis outstrips any other that you might compare it to. For example, we're well aware that in Fort Hood in 2020, 38 soldiers died. That led to extensive news coverage as well as 2 congressional investigations, which ultimately concluded with the entire chain of command at Fort Hood being fired. Even though the situation at Fort Bragg is objectively worse and has been for years, so far, to my knowledge, nothing has been done about it.
You say that Fort Bragg has a lot of secrets, a lot of underground narcotic secrets. It's its own little cartel. That was Freddie Huff, who is the ex-DEA agent, talking about Fort Bragg. What exactly does that mean?
So Freddie Huff was a corrupt North Carolina state trooper and DEA task force agent who became a high-level drug trafficker in North Carolina. He was the connection between Los Zetas in Mexico and this group of Special Forces soldiers on Fort Bragg who were trafficking and distributing drugs in the area. And that quote was from Mr. Huff. And, he was alleging that he sold, hundreds of kilograms of cocaine to this group.
How many people die of suicide, and how is that dealt with in the military at Fort Bragg?
A shocking and depressing number. The Army is well aware that it has a suicide problem. It has for a long time, but the numbers at Fort Bragg are really extreme. It's the #1 cause of death at Fort Bragg by far. And many of those deaths are also drug related, regrettably.
So why isn't there investigation going on? As President Trump tariffs Mexico and increases tariffs on Canada, talking about fentanyl, talk about what's happening at Bragg.
Well, on the contrary, there haven't been, not only has there not been any sort of reforms or any crackdown on this, but Trump and Hegseth, they make a big show of their support for Fort Bragg, changing the name back to Fort Bragg from Fort Liberty, giving speeches there, touting the Special Forces and the Airborne Corps, without really taking seriously some of these underlying and systemic issues, which are quite troubling.
One of the ways you use these murders to talk about U.S. presence in the military around the world is when you talk about Timothy DeMoss. You say he was a quartermaster with the Special Forces, and how he used his position, was it in Afghanistan, to bring drugs into the United States. Now, this is the guy who was murdered.
Yes, that's the allegation. Not only was he involved in that, actually Timothy Dumas, before he died, wrote a letter, a blackmail letter. It was with the intention of blackmailing the Special Forces because he had been kicked out of the Army for his misbehavior and his crimes and had been deprived of his pension as a result of that. In order to, in a stratagem to exert leverage on the Special Forces and get his pension reinstated, he composed this document which purported to name the members of what Mr. Huff called the Fort Bragg cartel. But before he was ever able to release that letter, he himself was murdered.
So let's talk about Afghanistan for a moment. Talk about the U.S. presence there, the forever war, and talk about heroin, drugs, and how they became so critical to the Afghan economy. And did the Taliban have anything to do with that?
It's really shocking the degree to which the war in Afghanistan had to do with drugs and drug production. It's an aspect of the war that was never covered to the degree that it ought to have been. Afghanistan, under U.S. occupation, became by far the biggest narco state in the world, producing more heroin than the entire planet could absorb. Most of the drug trafficking and drug production was being carried out and done by warlords, police chiefs, militia commanders who were on the U.S. payroll in a corrupt structure, which you could plausibly describe as a cartel that went all the way up to the president of Afghanistan, Karzai and his brother, as well as Ashraf Ghani. During the entire time that the U.S. occupied the country, it was turning out staggering quantities of very high potency heroin, which flooded the entire planet and caused terrible heroin crises all over the world, including in the United States.
You write, no person in any position of influence dared to suggest that the scourge of opiate addiction, then afflicting the poor and working class across the United States, might have resulted from the wartime narcotics bonanza.
Right. And part of that has to do with the DEA's assertion that only 1% of heroin in the United States comes from Afghanistan. This is something that we were told by the DEA during the course of the war, and which was duly repeated by many media outlets. But I go into some detail in my book about why I believe that that number was fictitious. And in fact, just as in Canada, just as in Australia, Russia, wherever you look in the world, by far the majority of heroin in the United States, I believe, came from Afghanistan.
I wanted to move over to Ukraine. You have the summit that President Trump is holding with Vladimir Putin in Alaska tomorrow. You spent a good amount of time in Ukraine. Talk about where you were, when you were there, and what the U.S. Special Forces were doing there.
I was in Ukraine at the start of the war. I was in Kyiv during the Battle of Kyiv. And at that time, we had been told that there were no U.S. military forces in Ukraine, that they had all been withdrawn on orders of President Biden before the Russian invasion. However, I was the first to report that, in fact, there were members of the Joint Special Operations Command active in Ukraine from day one, including members of the Delta Force, as well as SEAL Team 6. And that reporting was subsequently confirmed by other media outlets. They may not have specified what units they came from, but certainly the presence of U.S. special operators in Ukraine has been confirmed.
So talk more about the significance of this, where they came from in the United States, what they were doing.
Well, they all come from Fort Bragg, and the conventional troops that were there in Poland to back up the Ukrainian army also came from Fort Bragg, the 82nd Airborne Division. That's an illustration of the centrality of Fort Bragg to all U.S. military operations. Now, where are they in the country of Ukraine right now? That's not, I don't know. I don't know that anybody knows that. But certainly it is concerning that we have our U.S. military personnel there in a conflict with another nuclear armed power.
I wanted to go to President Trump's relationship with the military. There's the op-ed in the New York Times today talking about how it was thought it would ultimately, interestingly, be the military that would stop Trump from using it on the ground in the United States. The headline is, "We used to think the military would stand up to Trump. We were wrong." And I wanted to go back to, we've talked about the New York Times revealing a trove of confidential military interviews with the Navy SEALs who accused Chief Edward Gallagher of war crimes. He met with President Trump at Trump's private resort in Mar-a-Lago weeks after Trump overruled his own military leaders and blocked them from disciplining Gallagher, despite him being convicted of posing with a teenage corpse in a high-profile war crimes case. He was also accused of fatally stabbing the captive teenager in the neck and shooting 2 Iraqi civilians, but he was acquitted of premeditated murder. In the never-before-released videos, the soldiers tell Navy investigators Gallagher was toxic and freaking evil. So he was a Navy SEAL. You served in Iraq. You also report on Iraq. Talk about the significance of this pardoning, ultimately, that Trump did of Gallagher, and who exactly he was and where he was found guilty of committing these crimes in Iraq.
Trump's cozying up to war criminals like Eddie Gallagher is one of the most deplorable features of his administration, and is an illustration of the incredibly deleterious effect that Trump's malignant command influence has had on the entire special operations community. Because Eddie Gallagher is somebody who was turned in by his own teammates who are far from bleeding heart liberals. These are active duty Navy SEALs fighting in Mosul and Iraq, who see their chief murdering people right and left, men, women, children, unarmed people. He was caught on video about to stab that teenage ISIS fighter in the neck. His teammates wanted him gone. The Navy SEAL command wanted him gone. But Trump saw an opportunity to make guys like Eddie Gallagher part of his personal political brand. And that is, he also pardoned people like Matthew Goldstein, who was a Green Beret officer, who admitted to committing murder on live television. Other people that Trump has made part of his retinue, some of the craziest people in the special operations community. All of this has had the effect of, you know, there are people in this community who do go by a sense of ethics, and who are not so criminally inclined. And the more Trump is in office and doing things like this, the fewer you have of those people. And the more you have of the sort of piratical types like Eddie Gallagher staying in and rising higher in the ranks. And you see that in the kind of fallout of the domestic crime that I describe in my book.
We're talking to Seth Harp. He is the author of the Fort Bragg Cartel. It's out this week, the subtitle Drug Trafficking and Murder in the Special Forces. What did you discover, Seth, about the intelligence role of Delta Force and its covert actions in countries where the U.S. is not at war?
It's really incredible how little we know about the Delta Force. I believe my book is the only sort of serious investigative look at the unit, despite the fact that it is the most elite unit in the U.S. military and has been at the forefront of all U.S. Wars since at least 2001. So Delta Force, I'd be happy to tell you anything about the unit. What should I say?
You tell us. You wrote the
intelligence gathering, you said.
Yes.
So it's interesting because a lot of people are not aware the extent to which these type of units, Delta and JSOC, which Delta is a part of JSOC, are, besides their paramilitary capacities, besides their operations doing assassinations and abductions in war zones, they also have a strong intelligence gathering capabilities, and they have troops that are overseas, that are active duty U.S. military members who are not wearing uniforms, who are not carrying IDs, who are operating under cover identities, sometimes pretending to be American businessmen, other times pretending to be State Department employees, but in fact are carrying out military operations in countries with which the United States is not at war, including things like bugging missions, other things that we don't know about. And I think what's most crucial to emphasize in this context is that unlike the CIA, unlike other civilian intelligence agencies that are subject to congressional oversight and must report their covert actions to Congress, the military is largely exempt from that type of oversight. And so I think that's one reason why you have seen a lot of the authority over covert action shift from civilian agencies to JSOC over the last 20 years.
Before we wrap up, I wanted to go to these latest moves by Trump. I mean, that special secret directive, we're using it today to talk about what's happening at home when it comes to drug cartels. But what about, and you've reported from Mexico, what about what Trump is saying, that the Pentagon can deploy in countries like Mexico? The Mexican president said, had a very fierce reaction against this, going after drug cartels there. You started talking about Fort Bragg being a place where some of the most dangerous of these cartels were actually trained.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Most Zetas were trained at Fort Bragg, at Fort Benning, and they also received training from Israeli instructors before they went rogue. Another indication or another illustration of how U.S. military intervention often stimulates drug production. What was the second part of your question, or what was the?
Well, talking about Mexico and the U.S. deploying troops there.
I mean, it's complete to the extent in these days with the genocide in Gaza and so many other things going on, we almost have lost sight, and it seems like nobody cares about international law. But I just want to point out that kind of the obvious, that using military force against drug traffickers, however bad you think drug traffickers are, that's a total violation of the laws of war. They're not combatants in war, they're criminals. So that's one thing. Another aspect of it is, the sort of typical Trump showmanship. It's not clear to me, from having worked in Mexico as a reporter for years, that the sort of cartels that the DEA creates organization charts to illustrate and tout and purport. I don't know that those really are such coherent organizations as they might imagine. And I question whether they have the intelligence on these purported organizations where they could actually carry out military strikes on them. I don't know that they actually have the targeting intelligence for that to become a reality. But in any event, they ought to look more closely at the drug crime that's taking place in the United States and even on our own military bases.
And can you talk about the long U.S. history, military and clandestine operations and drug trafficking in Southeast Asia? For people who are not aware of what happened, as well as in Latin America, for example, the illegal funding and support of the Contras in Nicaragua and the thousands of Nicaraguans who were killed.
Sure, there is a long pedigree of this kind of thing. Covert alliances between U.S. Special Forces and paramilitaries and intelligence agencies and foreign forces that are implicated in the international drug trade. As you indicate, one of the first examples of that was in Laos and in Cambodia and Vietnam during that era, as well as in Central America, the case of the Nicaraguan Contras. However, I must say all of it pales in comparison with the complicity of the practically the whole of the U.S. government with heroin cartels in Afghanistan during the war there. The amount of drugs that were produced, the openness of the alliance between the United States and known drug traffickers in that country surpassed anything that we had previously seen in American history.
What most surprised you, Seth, in your research for this book? You as a member of the military, but then stepping outside, you became a lawyer. You were an assistant attorney general in Texas, but a longtime investigative journalist around the world.
The stuff about Afghanistan, I think, was the most shocking to me because it was one country where I had not worked, and I really wasn't aware of the degree to which the U.S. client state was the entity responsible for producing most of the drugs in Afghanistan. I had been kind of snowed like everybody else with this narrative that it was the Taliban that was doing it. But in the course of writing the book, the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan, and the Taliban in 2023 had completely eradicated all drug production from Afghanistan. So seeing the Taliban come into power and totally eliminate that massive drug producing industry that the U.S. had not only tolerated but supported for 20 years really showed, I guess, really belied, the claim until then that it was either the Taliban or it was both sides, when in fact it was really our guys that were doing it the entire time.
Do you think with this special directive, a secret directive that Trump has signed, that special forces operations in Latin America will increase under the guise of fighting cartels?
It's possible. I find that to be a very complicated prospect. So many of the drug traffickers in Latin America are military or police forces that are allied with the United States. Things are changing in Mexico and in Colombia, but historically, the biggest drug traffickers in the Americas have been, let's say, the Colombian army and right-wing paramilitaries affiliated with the Colombian military. As well as, you see the same type of phenomenon in Honduras and El Salvador and also in Mexico. So when they talk about targeting these people, who exactly are they talking about?
Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe.
Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. In last evening's Sunday address, we talked about the pretense that Trump used for his quote-unquote takeover of D.C., and that was the alleged attempted carjacking of one Edward Big Balls Corsatine. This happened to be a member of Doge, who, along with his co-conspirator Marco Ilez, also happened to be on the scene to take photographs of this guy, and I assert that this is all part of a hoax, that it was all staged. Well, this morning's briefing in a way dovetails with that. Brother Tariq has given his own take about Trump's takeover of D.C., and one of the things that he's put forward is that he believes that Trump's takeover of D.C. is meant to kill two birds with one stone. The first, of course, is to remove Jeffrey Epstein from the headlines so Trump can get some of the heat off of himself, at least for now. But Brother Tariq has also asserted that this would inevitably be used as a way for Trump to ramrod through some of his immigration policies under the guise of expediting his anti-crime schemes through forcing local and federal cooperation to take place. One of the things that's occurred since Trump took over DC police is that his DOJ used this authority to rewrite a directive that has now eliminated a DC rule that limited cooperation between the DC police and federal immigration authorities. The District of Columbia sued the Trump administration and Attorney General Pam Bondi earlier on that same day. DC alleges that Bondi's efforts to scuttle the district's sanctuary rules curbing local police cooperation with immigration authorities during the federal police takeover are illegal. So what this means is the leaders of DC's local government had put a sanctuary city policy in place, no matter what the locals actually thought of it. And as I've detailed for you here, even these crooked cops have found ways to get paid off of illegal immigration by getting kickbacks from the human traffickers, like what's been going on in Louisiana, where even police chiefs would, for a few $1,000s, write up false police reports claiming that some illegal alien was a victim of a crime or a witness to a crime, and that would get them a special visa for crime victims and witnesses, which would allow them to stay in the U.S. So when you have the police claiming that immigration enforcement would make illegals scared to cooperate with police, what they really mean is that enforcing immigration would eliminate a lucrative income stream that the thugs in blue have come to rely on. But this latest change in DC also dovetails with another change from a few months ago. I've been saying that the orange man cannot say that he's serious about immigration enforcement unless he begins to target these crooked employers who knowingly break the law and hire illegals. Well, Trump's DOJ said that they're going to start targeting these employers. Back in February, Attorney General Pam Bondi issued a directive instructing all U.S. attorneys to treat immigration-related offenses, including employing, transporting, or harboring undocumented workers, as investigative and charging priorities. The directive instructs prosecutors to pursue the most severe penalties. Then, in May, the Department of Justice expanded its corporate whistleblower awards pilot program to include corporate violations of federal immigration law among the categories eligible for financial awards. Under the program, whistleblowers whose original information leads to significant forfeitures may receive up to 30% of the recovered assets, creating the potential for multi-million-dollar payouts in large-scale immigration enforcement actions. So this potentially, if enforced, could amount to putting a bounty on the heads of unscrupulous employers. Nothing wrong with that. But there's also one other change that they made. U.S. Immigrations and Custom Enforcement also have reintroduced and encouraged members of the public to use their tip line to report suspicious criminal activity, including illegal immigration and other violations of immigration laws. So when you see people who clearly can't speak the language and are giving all the signs that they're from way out of town, you can and should call ICE to report this as suspicious activity. If you see something, say something. Now, equally interesting to me is how the white media's business pages are treating these developments, where previously all we ever heard was how implementations like these are impossible and way too costly for business and how unfeasible it is. Now we're beginning to get the white media starting to sing a different tune. Quote, a comprehensive I-9 audit for a company of 500 employees may cost between $10,000 and $20,000, and carefully reviewing and implementing an electronic I-9 and E-Verify system typically requires between $5,000 and $15,000 up front, with additional annual maintenance costs to cover vetting and implementation efforts. While these are significant investments, they pale in comparison to the potential civil fines up to $2,861 per defective I-9 and double that if the defective I-9 relates to an undocumented worker. Possible criminal exposure, massive fines, forfeitures, and disgorgement of profits, workforce shortages and operational impacts, and reputational fallout of enforcement actions. And Bloomberg Business ended the article by writing, as enforcement intensifies and regulatory expectations rise, the cost of waiting is too high. Businesses that build compliance into their operations now will be better equipped to weather audits, respond to investigations, and maintain workforce stability. What was once viewed as a defensive legal necessity has become a marker of operational maturity and long-term resilience. Long-term resilience. So they're writing this as if it's going to be a permanent part of the business landscape. And instead of arguing typically how complying with these directives is bad for business and unfairly burdens businesses with additional costs, instead we got at least one white media outlet saying that businesses better start adjusting to this new reality now because that will save them money in the future. This is not going away, seems to be the point that they're making. We will see. But the point is, they're not talking in the usual claptrap about angry businessmen who are objecting to all of this and want this stopped. Usually that's the line that gets put in there. They put in how so-and-so business consortium or so-and-so business association says that they're going to be fighting this and you can't do this and all these costs, etc. They're not even putting that in there. Their slant on this story was to talk about the necessity for businesses to comply with these worker verification schemes, not how it's unnecessarily burdensome for them to do so. And also, if these businesses and their mouthpieces want to try to claim that it's so expensive for them to comply with things like E-Verify, wait till you see the cost of not doing so. All right, now before we go any farther, let's go ahead and get this straight. I've been hearing chatter like this, but I haven't seen any employers actually getting jammed up. Until that begins to happen in appreciable numbers, these press releases are not much more than PR moves meant to pacify people who want to see serious action taken. But the moves in D.C., if followed up on and enforced, would be a great first move towards a nationwide model for compelling these local yokels to comply and coordinate with federal authorities on immigration enforcement. Now, we all know exactly why it is that this takeover of D.C. happens to also be a problem for Black Americans. Is largely because of the D.C. police themselves. It's not the National Guardsmen who are out there harassing Black folks. It's the thugs in the D.C. Police Department who feel as if now they got a little bit of extra time on their hands to go ahead and indulge their anti-Black whimsy. That's a huge part of it. But white supremacy believes in taking both sides of the conversation. They believe in duality. They believe in what there is that you see, and then there's something else going on just underneath that isn't so visible. Well, for our part, we go ahead and push back against whatever it is that's against our interest, that tries to curtail our movements or otherwise tries to make our lives harder. But by the same token, since ICE has re-implemented its tip line, at least on that front, there's certainly no reason why Black folks shouldn't be making sure that the authorities know what's going on, including any of these dirty cops who might decide that they're going to be trying to make a little bit of money for themselves off of illegal immigration. If Black folks are told that we just have to deal with extra scrutiny and harassment, then there's absolutely no reason why these illegal aliens and these unscrupulous employers shouldn't have to do the same. Good day and be one. I'd like to take
area, you got to do what works in any area with this crime. You know what works?
Next on deck with Tim Black.
Good morning. This is Commissioner Anthony Lorenzo Green, and it is like over 2 a.m. in the morning. I'm down here at 48th Street Northeast and Kane Place. President Trump and his Gestapo paid a visit to Deanwood tonight. Metro Transit Police, and along with other police agencies, shot at individuals on 48th Street. Thankfully, no one was hit, but there were 2 people detained. I'm still waiting for one of those individuals to be released. They've been holding them hostage in the alley in the neighborhood for a couple of hours now. And it's my understanding because he didn't do anything. Fed's been invading our neighborhoods for years. Deanwood is no stranger to a long list of federal agencies coming into our community to start nonsense. And tonight is no different. The only difference is that the president made an announcement that he was doing this. So here we are, 2 a.m. in the morning, waiting for an individual to be released, so everybody can go to sleep and go about their business. Maybe one of the elected officials that serve on the council that get paid to serve us will speak up and say something, maybe our mayor. or speak up and say something, I don't really care. But what I do care about is the safety of the residents in my community, ensure that they are not being hindered, impacted, and harassed, targeted by any entity in this city whatsoever. Deanwood don't play that.
Shout out to that brother. It's a commissioner here in D.C. And Commissioner Green, I think he said it was. He said something that was very important here, guys. He said, we're not new to this. Meaning, they cracked down on crime in D.C. before. This is not a new thing when you're cracking down on crime. It's not a new thing to be over-policed. But I want you to understand this. If nobody else gets it, I want you to be a watcher. You who watch this show, I want you to know, man, curfews, over-policing, the main outcome of that is what? What do you think the main outcome of that is? The main outcome of that is mostly non-criminal, non-violent, mostly non-doing anything. People get swept up in it. Okay? The punitive nature of our criminal justice system, just getting picked up and having to go through that process for something dumb like being outside can ruin your life. To a large degree, you can lose a job, you can lose a scholarship, you might lose where you live, you might lose your kids. People don't understand this. Like, I understand there's black people going, hey, man, we need to stop the violence that's happening in our neighborhoods. And we're going to get further into that. But you got to understand, making arbitrary things like walking outside for young black people, putting a target on their backs who may not have done something, you know, just being a black male should not be enough to be harassed by cops. But it's always been that way. There are people that are walking around right now who've listened to content, who've heard us talk about the immigration situation, about deportations. They've heard me talk about it, they heard others talk about it. And they've retweeted stuff and posted stuff and went to live streams like this and been like, yeah. They won't even really listen. They were so emotionally wrapped up in what was being said. Part of my pushback to all the hoopla about deportations and Latino people or people of Latin descent going, we getting profiled is, we already been getting profiled. Now because Trump and the media or whoever are telling you, DC is really bad. We got black people looking at an incident that occurred, that's horrible, going, see, we need to be cracked down more. We need to be hitting the head more. We need more black people to go to jail. That'll fix it. And it's sad. That's already been happening. I question if people are really seriously invested in any of this other than to feel good because something got done. We've been over police in the black community. Taking a young man, a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 19-year-old person who hasn't committed a crime, a violent crime, putting them in jail, picking them up, locking them up, holding them, putting them in the thing. Like you create more criminals by doing it. You put people in bad situations by doing that. And it's a cycle. So what I'm saying is, if you really want to fix crime in any area, you got to do what works in any area where there's crime. You know what works? It's not over-policing. It's not picking up people for petty shit. That's how we fill the jails up so they go work the fields for 20 cents or 10 cents an hour. That's what that was for. They told you it's because they dangerous. Well, really, it was just to make money. And there's so many books about it. I feel like if you care, maybe go read the new Jim Crow with Michelle Alexander. Go read that, the new Jim Crow. We got people who I think mean well, who are misinformed, disinformed, and some people just don't want to be informed on a lot of this. The thing that works is investment in resources for young people for their neighborhoods and for those environments. That is the best way to combat crime for anybody in any situation. Anyone. When people get rap sheets, they can't get housing. They don't get job assistance. They can't get loans to go to school. There are things that happen to you that put you further into the underworld, that put you further into the life. If anybody cared about the kids, you know what they do? They will make sure the kids and the parents of those kids had places to be. Instead of a curfew, some kids out on the street because their parents at work. Some people on the street because their parents are strung out. That's why they out late. Now, what we got is Trump and his administration trying to do what Kamala did. And some of us didn't vote for Kamala. Why? Because she locked up black parents whose kids were truant. Now you support Trump locking up black parents because the kids not in the house. What's the damn difference? Now, I've been a critic of Kamala Harris, but I ain't no damn hypocrite. You can't say Kamala's garbage for trying to lock out black parents because kids ain't going to school and then say Trump is the savior or we got to do something. Now we're going to do a curfew and then charge the parents if the kids ain't home. It's the same thing. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? The plan is so great. Why is this the same plan that Kamala had, which we know was garbage? How is it a good plan? 90% of what Trump does is just for show, for sound bites, for coverage, for show, which forms perception, which forms your reality. My name is Tim Black, and this has been my TED Talk.
What's your message to Democrats who, are in Washington right now, or members of the media, the legacy media, who claim that D.C. is a safe place to live and work?
Yeah, you all are the people who painted Black Lives Matter on the road leading to the White House. You're the people who kept chanting that and slapping it on the back of your cars in a bumper sticker. So let me ask you a little something. Is it just because I'm sitting here talking about it and I talked about it in the new media seat inside of the White House press briefing yesterday?
Of 15 years, I've lived on Capitol Hill. I've witnessed so many muggings and so much theft. I've lost track. I was carjacked. I have murders on my Ring camera and mass shootings. I witnessed a woman on my block get held up at gunpoint for $20, and my house was set ablaze in an arson with my infant child inside. As a Banny report, that sentence and lies that D.C. is a safe place to live and work. Let me just say this. Good. Thank you. Thanks for making the city safe, because no parent should have to go through what my family went through, having the fire department rip open their door to save their infant child. So thank you for your work on securing the city. My question to you is this: Nancy Pelosi has attacked.
That people are paying attention? I mean, listen, the vast majority of crime is committed against Black people in D.C. by other Black people in D.C. So if you believed that Black Lives Matter, this would be a massive bipartisan effort in order to clean up this city. I am very much, and your last guest is very much outliers. We happen to be journalists and have social media followings, and we do this profession, but the vast majority of victims of crime, like, for instance, Davon McNeil, I'll never forget that name, a young boy, 6 years old, killed by a stray bullet on my block. What was his crime? Sitting on his front porch. He was there with a phone charger, shot by a stray bullet in a senseless drive-by, something that regularly happened on my block. A young Black boy, no one will ever remember his name. And so if I could tell you a quick story that I think is remarkable from the White House yesterday. White House staffers were telling me that part of the painful ironies is that regular corporate media, White House personalities that are famous and renowned regularly complain to them about how dangerous their commute is into the White House from their neighborhoods. They complain about being robbed. They complain about crime. They complain about gangland behavior. Yet when they get in there and get their scripts, they say that DC is safe. Right. But behind the scenes, they are telling the truth.
And
they're
therein
frauds,
lies the problem.
And it's good to call them out.
Yeah.
Yes.
And no, I think that with Democrats, it's not Black Lives Matter. It's Black votes that matter. And the other, and I mentioned this a moment ago, 77% of Black babies in 2024 were born to unwed mothers. 77%. That's more than 3 out of 4. You think maybe that's part of the problem? You think maybe the media should bring that up? Black mayor and a black chief of a police in D.C., and it's gotten worse, not better. Benny Johnson, we got to leave it there. Good to see you.
Benny Johnson's from Iowa, right? So he comes to the big city from Iowa. I don't know how much crime is in Iowa. I really don't. I really don't know. I don't know what they do there in Iowa. Tip cows. I do agree that there are people that put on bumper stickers of Black Lives Matter who really didn't care about Black lives. It's just a trend, sort of like MAGA for a lot of people. Yeah, I feel like MAGA for a lot of people was like a trendy thing too, like no substance under it, just thought it was the right thing to be about. He said America first. You don't really look into shit, you just kind of go with it. And I'm not talking about Benny particularly, but I'm saying basically there are people, I mean, how much research do MAGA people really do about MAGA? It's like a community for them and they join it and it's you know, whatever. And Black Lives Matter for some people was sort of the same thing. You know, it wasn't even anybody to vote for. It's just a thing. It was an abstract idea, an assertion that black people should live, which is something everybody should be about. But just saying Black Lives Matter for people like Benny was saying white people's lives don't matter, even though that has never been a question in America. But Benny's bringing up some other good points here that need to be addressed, Johnson. He said there's crime in D.C. and no one wants to talk about it. My question to Benny is, how much did you really care about the crime? I mean, dog, I lived in some bad apartments in Maryland, Prince George's County, Maryland, up there near Suitland, over in District Heights, Maryland. And when my apartment got shot in, I moved. Why are you still living places like that? I'm just wondering. I'm not saying you sound like you're full of shit, but you sound like I mean, if I looked at my Ring camera and saw a mass shooting on my Ring camera, dog, from Iowa, you put up with that? I don't know. I'm not saying you're full of shit. I'm just saying, I don't know. The fact that you work for Turning Point USA, The Blaze, and Breitbart kind of makes this a heavy lift for me. Because that's like 3 right-wing organizations, like bap, 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 like in a row, Johnson. It's just a lot, you know, to kind of take you seriously. And I also believe that you really care about black people. And I know it shouldn't matter that you do or you don't. It's just you keep saying it like you do.
I'm going to need to see your receipt, sir.
Before Trump made this move, I didn't hear you talking about it. Before Trump decided to go into D.C., before the Doge white kid got beat up. I'm just wondering because it's but anyway, let's not even make this about Benny. Too much time on Benny, enough on Benny. Let's take it off at face value and say, okay, maybe he's got a point. Anybody can have a point. You look over, you see something on fire and say, hey, something's on fire. Can't you smell it? Now, what do we do about that? Benny, do you go and lock up the people? Or do you put the fire out? And then you find out where the fire started or how the fire began. What's going on? What's causing fires? I would think we want to find out what caused the fire. Let's do some forensics. Let's do some investigation. Let's not just blow up the building. Let's not just lock everybody up. Let's find out what happened. So when we find out what happened, what caused the fire, I'm trying to tell you, the solution to the fires are changing the environments, solving the problem of the environments. People are not just people who sell drugs, people who deal drugs, sell drugs, gangs, gang activity, these things, fighting over resources, fighting over corners. All these things are symptoms of bigger problems, and they deserve to be taken seriously. And if you don't want to take them seriously, won't you just admit you don't give a F? I would say it's all a lot of time. Of course, Trump wouldn't be able to show his side of his show of force. He wouldn't be able to ingratiate himself to a lot of white people who love nothing more than see black people getting in handcuffs. They love it. When I say white people, I mean a certain kind. I'm not talking about all. I'm definitely not talking about all. So we got a catch-22 because I agree. There are liberals who will do a lot of virtual signaling like they give a shit. But are they pushing for the programs that I'm talking about? No. So I'm not even on that. Okay, I want to be clear. I'm not on the they're right, you're wrong, because you're both wrong. You want to do something, but you don't want to do the thing that works, and they don't want to do shit. So we do the wrong thing that doesn't do anything to make it look like we did something, which is what Democrats typically do. They do things like, hey, let's have a hip-hop holiday. We could really use reparations. Hey, I got a better idea. What if we put Rosa Parks on some money for you? Wouldn't you feel good? All right, boy, let's do that. And we could really use some investment in our communities. How about some incubators? Because only 2% of venture capital money is what black people get. We only get 2%. Maybe what we could do is have some investment in our small businesses. Then we can fortify ourselves. Oh, God, that sounds like a great idea, Tim Black. But, hey, how about this instead? How about, I don't know, how about just Juneteenth? You like Juneteenth? How about if we make it a national holiday? Yeah, let's do that, boy. Go play some music. Someone cut on some Frankie Beverly and Mays. They love that song. Play that. They'll do a line dance. It'll be great. So don't get me wrong, Benny Johnson. I'm not saying you're wrong about liberals, but I'm saying you're the same because you want to do shit that doesn't help but hurts people. There are a good amount of people that are actually sincere. They just don't know enough to be helpful. And they just want to kill a fly with a Uzi. They want to help you, by hurting you. And I got a question, like, is it help if it's not helpful? Yeah, if it's not proven to help, it's not like we don't know it helps. It's not like we don't know it helps. Any poor people, any people that are struggling, any people that can't find adequate housing or stable homes or it's not like there aren't other countries. There are track records of what you need to do to fix it, to help it. It ain't going to happen overnight. It's going to have to take time. It didn't get broke overnight. It didn't get broke overnight, so it ain't going to be fixed overnight. That's why I question if they even want to fix it. That makes sense? It's not that hard to come up with solutions, if that's what you want. If you like that content, and I know you did, go ahead and become a member of the Tim Black Wolfpack.
That's preposterous. There's absolutely no way crime could be down 28. That's preposterous. There's absolutely no way crime could be down 28%. Last year, they suggested that it went down 34%.
So Kurt had a lot of suspicion. Now, Donald Trump has taken over the D.C. Police Department. He's going to try and make it permanent, from what I understand. And he's going to try to extend that to other cities. And I was making the point that the crime statistics are way down. Crime's way down, Kurt. Crime's way down in DC, according to the. But then guess what? Kurt was like, I don't trust those statistics, Jimmy. Effectively cutting the legs out from underneath that segment I was doing, and I was like, well,
welcome. All of you are welcome.
But guess what? It turns out Kurt was right.
Did they change the definition of like murder? And
yes.
It's like woman. It could be with a dick.
Well, it's worse. What's weird is that murder is up, but violent crimes are down. That's what they're trying to say. What?
That sounds so much better.
So
why would those things be separated?
Here's a headline that says DC. Right? Why would that be? DC police commander suspended, accused of changing crime statistics. So that's a headline from Channel 4 in Washington D.C. and they give you this crime statistics. Murder. The murder rate in D.C. is higher than that in Bogota, Mexico City, Islamabad. Look how slow it is in Paris, London, Madrid. Washington, D.C. is the red. So they try to tell you that, yeah, murder rates are up, but violent crime is down. I thought those are the same thing.
What is? Yeah, I'm sorry. What is? I
Sure.
don't even understand how you can parse that.
If there's one thing we know, Kurt, it's that Washington, D.C. is the home of the truth. I mean, it's where honesty is made, much in the same way that Disneyland is the happiest place on earth because there's a sign that says so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's a channel. NBC News in D.C. did this report. Let's watch.
The police union is putting its allegations on the record tonight, claiming police supervisors in the department are manipulating crime data to make it appear violent crime has fallen considerably when compared to last year.
When our members respond to the scene of a felony offense where there is a victim reporting that a felony occurred, inevitably there will be a lieutenant or a captain that will show up on that scene and direct those members to take a report for a lesser offense. So instead of taking a report for a shooting or a stabbing or a carjacking, they will order that officer to take a report for a theft or an injured person to the hospital or a felony assault, which is not the same type of classification.
Greg Pemberton says the police department's command staff is focusing on two categories in order to get the numbers to fall. They are armed with a dangerous weapon, an injured person to the hospital.
When management officials are directing officers to take reports for felony assault, or if they're going back into police databases and changing offenses to felony assault is not a category of crime that's listed on the department's daily crime stats. It's also not something that's a requirement of the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Program. So by changing criminal offenses from, for example, ADW bat or ADW gun to felony assault, that would avoid both the MPD and the FBI from reporting that as a Part 1 or a felony offense.
Pemberton says the union has been gathering evidence for some time now by looking at reports and talking with officers all over the city.
What we've heard through our members and through members of management that are willing to talk with the union is that this is a directive from the command staff, is that they want to make sure that these classifications of these reports are adjusted over time to make sure that the overall crime stats stay down.
As of last Monday, when we spoke with Pemberton, DC crime data shows violent crime was down 28%. Today, the department's website says violent crime is down 25% when compared to the same time last year, and overall crime is down 8%.
That's preposterous. There's absolutely no way crime could be down 28%. Last year, they suggested that it went down 34%.
As for the claims made by the union,
No shit. If you live in a city, you know.
So there's a little bit more to this.
And as for the claims made by the union, Chief Smith released this statement. It says, the Metropolitan Police Department is committed to upholding the trust and the confidence of the public. Any irregularity in crime data brought to my attention will be addressed immediately. I do not condone any official reclassifying criminal offenses outside the guidelines set in the MPD policy. Any allegation of this behavior will be dealt with through our internal processes, which will ensure those members are held accountable. I have the utmost confidence in the command staff leadership currently in place across the Metropolitan Police Department. And one other note, we did reach out to Chief Andre Wright, and he declined to comment.
Oh, really? He declined to comment? Really? Well, here, I'll come up with a comment for him. My comment is, we're proud of our police force and their ability to de-escalate problems. For instance, if a woman says she was sexually assaulted in Washington, D.C., we can now downsize it to just some guy was hitting on her.
Yeah, it's a separate thing.
Yeah. Especially if it's one of our newly arrived immigrants. So yeah. Kurt was right. So I just wanted to update that story. Because I watched Glenn Greenwald's coverage of, Trump's takeover of the DC police, and he made a good point. He goes, let's say crime is down 26%. You still got carjacked. You don't care what that...
Yeah, that's true.
You don't care.
It went up 100% for me, carjackings. Yeah. That's funny.
And that a lot of DC staffers, I guess, according to Glenn Greenwald, have been, have complained about this, about the crime. And, I go to DC... At least it seems like at least once a year. And I guess I'm always in the nice parts, whatever. I'm only in the parts that you go if you're a tourist, you know?
Well, I would say New York, I'll bet you the crime's way higher in touristy parts more than like where like Russell lives, you know?
Yeah.
Because he was like, was not bad by me. I'm like, nah, they're all concentrating in the touristy parts that the cops used to have on lock. When I used to be there, the cops, you know, because you're dealing with drug addicts and drunks all weekend. It looks like Armageddon there. But now they don't have the police presence because they got rid they defunded.
That did not happen, Kurt. They did not defund the cops.
Whatever that stupid that
didn't
slogan sucks
happen.
twice.
That was all a lip service that the Democrats were giving about we wanted to defund the police.
Black Lives Matter.
To Black Lives Matter. And when it came to defund the police, they said, hey, you know what? Let's do the opposite. Let's invent another police force and fund it to the tune of $2 billion.
They defunded public protection from the police is what they took away. I'm sure they added more police, but the cops on the beat, they're supposed to be there. They're not there now. So that got defunded because they're not there. And here where I live in Soros Town, Austin, they did the police force left because the union, you couldn't pay them less. So all the experienced officers quit when that bullshit was going on. And now they have people for a lot cheaper. And they can't bring back the experienced ones because the rules with the union or whatever. So that was a little trick. The money didn't go in the pockets of officers and whatever. It went to whatever these, like, I don't know what the hell it goes to.
So
it's like homelessness. The money goes in and there's more homelessness.
So it looks like, again, it doesn't feel good that Donald Trump is, you know, his answer to everything is let's lock him up. Right. And he says that we're going to evict, we're going to get rid of the homeless. We're going to kick them out. Like that. The reason why they're on the street is because they've already been kicked out. They got kicked out of their, he's like, we're going to evict them. They're on the street because they've been evicted. You can't evict someone twice.
To housing? You're going to, where would you evict people that live outside to?
Right. My joke was, why don't you just pretend like they're immigrants and give them, put them in hotels?
Well, I honestly don't understand that. Like, how is there all these hotels for people coming in illegally off an app? Well, I guess I don't even know if it's legal. Actually, I mean, they might have said they're asylum seekers, and we're changing it so you can just come in. And I knew New York almost went bankrupt, right, from putting them up in fancy hotels for way more money than a hotel would.
Right,
hotels got paid way more to put NGO brought in mass migration. So I don't understand why they can't do that for Americans.
The fact is they can. There's like $45 billion in the big beautiful bill to build more prisons for ICE. And so what do you think they're going to do when they can't fill those beds? They're going to put Americans in there, right? And I wonder if they put on, I've made this point before. Like, so if they took that $45 billion and just built housing for people, that would be a start.
Oh, it would ruin the market, wouldn't it? Because all the foreign investment, say in New York and here and all the major cities where the rent never goes down, they wanted to encourage that global investment.
Yeah.
So
how about you just
they want affordable housing? It'll bring down the market for the real estate cunts.
How about we how about we don't allow Chinese billionaires to buy property in America? How about we stop that kind of stuff? You know why we don't? You know why? It's because the real estate lobby wants that money here because they want real estate to be as expensive as possible because they make more money. So that's what's happening. There's ways to help out. One of them is I haven't looked 100% into this, but it seems nuts that there's all these empty properties being bought by wealthy people who aren't American. And then they sit dormant and empty. And I know that's a problem. And it would be great if they got rid of the foreigners being able to buy real estate in America. They could just stop it.
Or why don't you, like instead of rent control, which was the way to keep that up without doing what they should do, you build more housing. You don't have foreign nationals buying up all of your real estate. What country does that?
Well, we're going to talk about that in a sec. You're right. I wonder if what other country allows that to happen. But anyway, we're going to talk about that in a second about the rent control in New York. But turns out Kurt was right. It looks like that they've been fudging the numbers on the crime statistics in Washington, D.C. to the point where the head of the police union is accusing the police administration of fudging the numbers.
Yeah, the police chief.
Yeah.
What's her name? Pamela something. She's from Arkansas, of course.
So they asked her, now that Trump was taking over the police in DC, a reporter asked her, what's the chain of command now? And she says, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I just saw like a meme of that. I didn't see the video of her saying that, so I can't vouch for the veracity that she actually said that. But
well, it's easy to believe after I saw the guy, Biden's Fed guy, not know why we borrow money that we
that's right.
print.
Yeah.
So it seems at every level there's been some imbecile that doesn't know anything about what they're supposed to do. Why is that?
So it's going to be interesting to see how this all works out, and I really want to see what he does with the homeless people, because if you just lock up the homeless people, it costs $130,000 a year in California to put somebody in prison. I bet you could find them an apartment or a hotel room for a lot less. And of course, these people need drug treatment programs. These people need mental health facilities. Why not take some of that $45 billion and build mental health facilities that the United States got rid of? Starting in the 50s. What didn't start with Reagan? That's what a lot of people thought. I thought that. And then turns out, no, that started in the 50s, the deinstitutionalization of the mentally ill.
Well, he did that in L.A. in the 50s, I believe, didn't he? In California? When was he governor of California? He was doing that in California.
I think he was governor of California, was in the 70s, maybe?
Oh, was it?
I'm not sure. But they've been doing that nationwide. It wasn't just the Ronald Reagan thing. They were doing that nationwide, deinstitutionalizing the mentally ill. We don't have the capacity to take care of these people. But looks like Trump's going to build the prisons. And instead of taking care of them with the, drug treatment or mental health care, or, just creating jobs and affordable housing, they're going to create unaffordable prisons and put people in prison.
Why don't they make the CIA pay restitution, because they're the ones that brought them drugs in that created that massive problem that we've never recovered from.
Right.
And we know they did. Everybody knows they did. There's no punishment for them. Scott Adams, I guess, will encourage us to just acknowledge that they're just going to lie to you. That's your lot in life.
So, tip of the hat to Kurt for getting this one right, and made me
guys, invest now.
Invest now, and
if you thought I was right about this, I'm going to tell you about Hot Tool Coin.
If you'd like to hear some of my jokes about Trump's takeover of the DC police, you can come see me in Rutherford.
Here this week and is ongoing, and as well what happened in LA a couple months ago.
Yeah, I mean, because this does seem for a lot of people like just optics. I mean, what it sounds like, what you're saying is that it looks kind of more optics based, and with LA, it's certainly, like I said, at the beginning of this, I've lived in Los Angeles for a long time. There's just a lot of like hyper, oh, wow, it's just really bad. And the rest of us Los Angelinos are like, I mean, I'm not noticing it. It's not. So why are we doing this? Like, why are you sending in the troops? I mean, but it seemed like it was more optics based. What is your take on that?
Yeah. So just as a little refresher on what had actually happened. So there had been ICE enforcement that had been increased because of Trump's sort of directive, right? And so there were, for example, ICE agents basically approaching people at Home Depot, show me your papers, and arresting people, that kind of thing. And so that led to what became the riots in Los Angeles in early June. What was unusual about how that was responded to is that Trump ordered the National Guard into that area of Los Angeles where the riots have been taking place against the wishes of the governor there. So Washington, D.C. is different because D.C. Is not a state and does not sort of enjoy the state rights that other places do. But in general, a state's National Guard is ordered into a situation by their governor, not by the president. However, the president is the sort of commanding officer of the military in general. And so, at least in this case, when he said, "That's what I want," that's what happened. And that is now being litigated as far as whether he should have been allowed to do that. Additionally, he took the fairly unprecedented step of sending in U.S. Marines, not National Guardsmen, but Marines. Now, I think it does get to this aesthetic question again, though, because in the time that I was in Los Angeles, and my understanding is this is pretty consistent with other journalists on the ground who spent time covering, before and after I was there as it relates to the riots, the actual riot policing was being done primarily by the Los Angeles Police Department as well as the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. Okay.
Yeah.
The National Guard was, for the most part, basically standing there around federal buildings. And that is consistent with what their job basically is. When National Guardsmen are deployed to these places, kind of their high priority is protect a federal building. And in the case of the LA riots, they were very focused on one particular federal detention center. And so it kind of made sense that it happened that way. But in terms of the actual policing, if you watched sort of my videos of rubber bullets being shot and tear gas and batons and horses, right? All the kind of action that you see on the news, these are cops. These aren't federal troops.
These are cops. Right, right.
And I would say that this is particularly true about, it was a really big deal, at least as a headline, that the Marines were deployed. But the Marines basically just stood there again around a federal building. Nobody was fighting Marines. Marines weren't parties to the conflict. And so
it's like, what was the point of even having any of them there is kind of the question then. And that makes sense because, the National Guard and the Marines, I mean, LAPD, they know what they're doing. Having lived in Los Angeles for a long time, I've seen some crazy stuff, and the LAPD absolutely knows what they're doing. I mean, they are highly trained and they can handle some really insane situations. And in a way that I cannot imagine the National Guard or the Marines even having the training to handle it the way that the LAPD knows how to handle it. I mean, the LAPD knows how to handle any of these riot situations. I've seen them deal with like a woman that basically was holding someone hostage on Venice Beach. And I mean, you should have just seen the way the LAPD deployed. They had guys on roofs. They had the whole place surrounded. I mean, it looked like a war zone, kind of like they knew what they were doing, and they know how to do it in an urban environment that isn't warfare. I mean, what do Marines know how to do? Do they know how to handle civilian urban environments where you're just trying to take out one person instead of like bombing the entire neighborhood? I mean, what do they, I don't know if they know how to do that or not, but I don't think that they have that same sort of training to the level that like LAPD has.
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly not doing that on the day-to-day. So it's an unusual deployment. And again, them just protecting buildings is not the same as them actually tamping down on riots. While I was out there and would see, groups of people ending up getting kettled, for example, right, where the rioters were moving and now they're stuck, right? And now either they're all going to get arrested, or the more common thing is they let them go one by one, so it sort of effectively disperses the riot without and forces it to end without making mass arrests. All of that kind of stuff is done by police departments. But I think what Trump did accomplish, again, for better or for worse, right? I mean, people can debate whether this is, whether he should have done this. But I think what Trump has accomplished with both Los Angeles and DC is that he's sort of asserted his presidential authority to take over policing matters in cities, right? And he's done that in both cases by sort of invoking federal powers in a way that is unusual. So again, in the case of National Guard being deployed in California, that wouldn't be that unusual, but for the fact that the governor didn't want it to happen. And Trump
it was
did
the president
it anyway.
and not the governor. Yeah.
In the case of DC here, the mayor originally on day one of this, when the Home Rule Act provision that said that Trump can basically command the MPD if he wants to, the mayor basically said, well, we looked at the law and it says the mayor shall comply. So here we are. And now as of this morning, the mayor has, or the DC Attorney General, my understanding is, has filed a lawsuit trying to sort of pick at the exact wording of it. It says something like the president can use them for a mission that he wants to, but not just he can take over the whole thing and change the chain of command, is basically what DC is going to argue. Again, it's going to turn into a legal fight that I would guess is going to be more a matter of the judge that ends up hearing it. But he's now twice in two cities on two different coasts kind of invoked federal power in a way that hadn't been done before.
What's interesting is how his base, how Republicans, how freedom-loving, more libertarian-esque Republicans are going to react, how they're reacting to this. Because from somebody who's like more of a libertarian, yeah, absolutely, get out of the states. We do not want federal government in the states. The states are independent. They need to be running themselves. I mean, that is the most basic libertarian stance. That is the libertarian stance, states' rights, and get the federal government out. Less federal government controls states' rights. And so when Governor Newsom says, hey, get out of my state, and then you got all these Republicans saying, no, we need to send in the feds. I mean, it's like the hypocrisy. It's just mind blowing. Are you guys listening to yourselves and you claim to be Republicans? Remember, you're supposed to be for states' rights. Like
it absolutely represents a political shift. I mean, I would point out, just if you look at a voice like Alex Jones, right? His kind of like, here's the worst thing that can happen. And the narrative that he would kind of like propagate about that is like martial law, right? Is the idea of federalization of police forces or being policed kind of by the military, on American jurisdictions. So I think that was something that the right wing was broadly much more concerned about. I kind of researched like what were people talking about this kind of thing when Obama was the president. There was actually kind of what people would call a conspiracy theory, right, toward the end of the Obama presidency that Black Lives Matter protests that took place then would be used to usher in, the federalization of police, that this could be an Obama power grab. And of course, like that didn't actually come to happen. But I think that it's interesting that in the time period that we're in now, where Trump is kind of doing many of the things that the right wing had expressed concern about Democrats doing in the past, they're describing it as necessary for a variety of reasons, whether it's fighting fighting crime or fighting riots or whatever the thing is. So there's definitely been a political shift on this question. I would even use the more like recent example of, again, when the National Guard was deployed in the response to January 6th, I think there were a lot of conservatives who were really bothered by that. And it is just 4 years later, right? It's a Trump situation and a Trump situation, and this time they're far more in support of it.
Yeah, which I don't understand at all. Okay, so let's talk about the activism real quick. You said that there's protests. Obviously, we saw there's protests there that have been going on in DC. But even though people say that they're really outraged by this, these protests are significantly smaller than the protests from Trump's first term. Why do you think that is?
Right. So in Trump's first term, there was almost a joke that like protesting was like brunch, that basically any given Saturday, you could look up and figure out which protest is going to draw hundreds and thousands of people. And that was pretty consistent throughout Trump's first term. There is nothing about Trump's second term that I think would be less outraging to the left, to the types of people who would participate in such protests, right? Protests aren't smaller because people are less angry. So it's kind of like, what is it? I've spoken to a number of activists who were much more involved during Trump's first term and are not as much this time. And I've kind of heard a few perspectives on this. On the one hand, there's the idea that basically liberal, peaceful, free speech, but no breaking windows, and we shake hands with cops, that like that kind of the most non-confrontational, think women's march, putting on the pink hats, with the ears on them, that essentially that would just be effort spent doing nothing, that you're just going to be kind of clapping your hands for yourself for feeling like you're doing something, but that it's not changing much. That's one perspective I've kind of heard from the left. And then on the other hand, there's, as opposed to that kind of like liberal, very decidedly nonviolent kind of thing, that on the other hand, there's the idea of more militant protest, right? Like go out in Antifa style black bloc, break some windows, fight some cops, that kind of thing. And a position I've heard about that, again, as compared to 2020, there's the idea that that's going to be used as the impetus for Trump to do something worse, and that would affect the exact people that they say they're fighting for. So just to put that in a more tangible perspective, that if you're going to go fight ICE agents, then that will be used as the justification to make ICE more militant, which will then hurt immigrants more so. And so they're kind of trapped in this position where it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. But that any style of activism, there's almost an argument that it will end up being ineffective. And so there are still groups that are out there doing these sorts of demonstrations, and whether those kinds of demonstrations are actually going to affect anything, I mean, I guess it's just who's to say.
Do you think it's also just that actually more people are in support of cleaning up crime?
I would guess that the types of people who actually went out in the thousands in Trump's first term, right? So there's a distinction between popularity of policy among the population and popularity of policy among the type of people who would be doing that protesting in the first place. So if
Right.
I'm looking at this from the margin, right? If I'm looking at this in terms of shift from Trump's first term to Trump's second term, in order to believe that that what you just described as causal, oh, his policies are more popular, I would have to believe that the policies are popular among people who spent his first 4 years being mad at him. and then
Right.
he comes back in post January 6th, into a second term and is very clearly asserting his federal authority in a way that he hadn't in his first term. So, I mean, Trump 2 is a lot more extreme, I guess you could say, than Trump 1. And I think
Sure.
for Trump's base, many of them certainly are like, this is awesome. We didn't get this stuff during the first time. But if you're someone who doesn't like Trump, it's very hard for me to imagine, someone who wore a pink hat at the Women's March in the first term saying, okay, I didn't like him then, but now that he's deploying the military in Washington, D.C., now I'm happy. I can't, It's very hard to imagine that person exists.
Well, I will say that there's less hate this time around in this second term. I'm just not hearing the same level of hatred for Donald Trump as I heard in the first term. I mean, people really hated him and really thought that this fascist dictator crazy person was taking office. And there's certainly still people who feel that way, but I'm definitely hearing less of it. I think also what might contribute is mainstream media. I mean, this time around, mainstream media is covering Trump. Yesterday when he was doing a press conference, and I watch news, I have 4 going at the same exact time on my screen. I watch in multi-view, and all 4, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, and BBC, all of them had, well, maybe not the BBC, but the main, CNN and MSNBC and Fox certainly all were airing his press conference at the same time. And previously in the first term, CNN or MSNBC would kind of protest and say, we're not going to air this. We don't want to air lies. And they would fuel that. And this time around, they're not. This time around, they're actually, when I watch, I can actually tolerate watching the news now, even MSNBC, I can actually tolerate watching them because they're not sitting there just constantly, protesting. And so there's a shift, I think, maybe even just how the public is, because the first term, it almost became like a social activity, right?
Yeah.
To hate Trump. It was like, you're in our in group if you hate Trump, and we can be friends and we can hang out and we can have wine and we can go protest because we hate Trump. And now, it's like people aren't building their entire social circles and their entire social lives off of hating Trump. More people now are just like, oh, you like Trump? Oh, okay. Oh, well, like it's not the same, they're no longer like exiling family members over liking Trump. They're just like, my aunt likes Trump. Oh, well, like, it is what it is. But before it was like, you're not invited to Thanksgiving. So I do feel like there's something that's kind of shifted, perhaps.
There was a utility to activism in Trump's first term, and I think activism in general, which is that when people show up in physical space over a shared position, they end up making friends in that group.
It's a
and
bonding
organizing
experience.
with them, other things end up happening as a result of that of that protesting. I do generally agree with you about the shift in the media that's occurred in terms of that kind of like sniveling at it, like we're not running this because of the like that has changed, and the types of voices that they can cite as anti-Trump voices, whereas they used to be able to show images of angry people on the streets. As we pointed out, that's not really happening as much anymore. The other thing I would point out is that social media has also changed, where I do think that you had a more left dominant Twitter at one point, a place where they didn't lose all their customers based on banning Trump right at the end of his administration, right? So you had a left dominated Twitter that essentially anytime Trump did anything, you would have an inundation of Twitter explaining to you, this is bad, right? This is the worst thing that's ever happened. And now Twitter is more right dominated, and the people who are the most anti-Trump consider the act of even being on X, now X, to the people who now consider even being on X to be a Trump adjacent act, that X itself is right wing, have kind of almost self-segregated off to Blue Sky or other services.
Yeah, now
like
they're on Blue
that.
Sky.
And so I do think that almost the availability to a normal person, or I shouldn't say a normal person, the availability to the average person of finding angry left voices is more difficult. If the media is not broadcasting their disdain for him as overtly, if social media is not as inundated with people who are against him, and then there's fewer things on the street, all of those would lead someone to not visually experience people hating Trump as much. None of those things are actually evidence that people are happier with Trump. It's just kind of like the dissent is more hidden. And again, we'll find out when that
makes sense.
pops, if it does.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the people who hate Trump, before in my life still hate Trump. But I just will say, I just don't think I think they still hate him as much as they did before. But something has changed in the hate. I mean, they're willing to tolerate now Trump supporters, whereas before they wouldn't. And so now they're like, well, you voted for Trump. Okay.
And maybe they have to. I mean, he won the popular vote this time, right? Like there might be a perception that eliminating Trump fans from one's own life or social circle is more difficult in a country where he's marginally more popular than the first time he was elected.
Well, in my experience is California, and in California, Trump gained each election from 2016, 2020, and 2024. He gained in all of those elections. And so it's really difficult, and he gained with Hispanics. And so it's really difficult for, these liberals who hated Trump so viscerally to hate Trump voters when increasingly they're realizing, oh, it's my Hispanic friends who voted for Trump this time around. Like, I thought I was hating him on your behalf, and now it was actually you that voted for him. So it's and then when they realize that their Hispanic friends are also in favor of deportation, of like rounding them up and deporting the people who are illegally here. A lot of Hispanics are totally pro that, because they're like, I did it legally. You got to do it the way I did it. It's totally unfair that you can come here illegally when I did it legally. That's a real genuine sentiment amongst Hispanic communities in California, for example. But and in other parts of this country as well. So, but yeah, interesting. It's all interesting. So overall, I mean, your takeaway on, just kind of the overall takeaway of DC right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm kind of forward looking on what is this actually going to change. At the moment, Trump is authorized for 30 days, right? That's what the law actually prescribes. So assuming that the lawsuit does not prevent this from continuing in shorter order than that, it's after 30 days that the president is supposed to get the authorization of Congress in order to continue this. Again, this step has never been taken. So we're totally in uncharted waters. And that really only applies to one of these three measures, and that's the takeover of the MPD. Nothing would stop Trump from continuing to have the FBI and other federal agencies patrolling the streets. The National Guard, theoretically, he could keep out there sort of forever in the way that he has been. So I'm really interested in seeing the longevity of this move, and whether the crime statistics bear out the idea that it actually made any difference.
Yeah.
So
I mean, fair enough. If he wants to do it to DC, fair game, right? I mean, that's his city. I mean, it's the federal government city. It's supposed to be, right? It's a federal. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be. So, I mean, fine, fair enough. I mean, but going into other cities and the governors of those, of those states, that's he's going to have an interesting challenge on that front. But
and that'll be the
sure, do
question
it
is
in
whether he
DC.
does it to other places. This has been something that I've been asked actually by a few people this week is so he did it in California again in sort of an unprecedented way. Now he's doing it in
Yeah.
DC in an unprecedented way, but which the law has a prescription for. Theoretically, what stops him from saying, I've decided that New York City is too crime infested, and so I'm sending DEA and FBI agents to start patrolling the streets there, like that kind of move. Again,
Well, hopefully
it really remains to be
Constitution.
seen.
Hopefully the Constitution stops them from that because we're supposed to be a federation of states with rights and the governors are supposed to be running their own states. So my hope is the Constitution prevails because I am not in favor of federal government control over states. So because I'm more libertarian on that, I'm big on states' rights. So no, I don't want that. And I hope the Constitution prevails. Washington, D.C., fine, have at it. I mean, okay, let's see how you do. And then maybe the governors of these other states would look at Washington, D.C. and say, oh, it worked. So maybe we should do it in our cities, whatever did work or whatever didn't work, let's do it. And that would be up to them though. That's kind of, where it should be up to them.
Yeah. And I want to see that question answered. Did it work at the end of this first 30 days?
Yeah, we'll find out.
See the murder rates as compared to a year prior. Like it could go down or it could remain unaffected. And I think there's almost been this like attitude mostly on the right, which is if you don't support this, then you support the crime. That assumes that this actually would work.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And that's a great
proven.
point. That's a great point. If it doesn't work, then how can you support it? Yeah, it's kind of like to me, COVID measures, people still supporting the COVID measures. And it's like, how could you? What did they work?
That sounds like opening a new can of worms.
Yeah, I know it is. But still, it's just the same logic. It's like, unless it worked, don't champion it. Don't quit championing failure, basically, just for the sake of championing it because you want to be on a certain side or a certain narrative or you have a certain belief that's personal, whatever. But Ford, really fascinating. I thank you so much for being on. I really do appreciate, by the way, that you're kind of like, look, I don't want to get an opinion. I don't want to opinionize this. I don't want to, say, and I like that actually about you, that you're just, look, I'm just here to get the footage, to just show what's going on, and then let the rest of us, squabble over it and make opinions on it and give our perspectives. I appreciate that about you. We need more people like you, actually. We need more of this neutral type of news gathering in journalism. And, that's why I like Ground News, for example. I use them a lot during the day because they give me both sides. And I think people are gaining more of an appetite for this. So I hope that your channel grows. Where can people find you and this type of neutral work that you're doing, which I think is so
Videos, strange and odd news stories, and as always, let's go ahead and get right into today's video. So we do have a few things to talk about in today's video. For example, we now have news articles coming out saying how women will be replaced, women will be obsolete. So that's very ominous. And now it seems like first we had Resident Evil type rabbits, but now we have Resident Evil type squirrels. But before we go ahead and talk about that, I do want to go ahead and talk about Hurricane Erin. So for those that don't know, Hurricane Erin is one of the fastest rapidly intensifying storms in Atlantic history. Reading this news article right here, it says, Erin went from a Category 1 hurricane with 75 miles per hour winds at 11 a.m. on Friday to a Category 5 with near 160 miles per hour winds just over 24 hours later. This put Erin in the history books as one of the fastest strengthening Atlantic hurricanes on record and potentially the fastest intensification rate for any storm earlier than September 1st. So to put into perspective just how early Erin intensified, the next hurricane comparable to Erin when it comes to intensification rate was Hurricane Milton, and that didn't happen until October 7th. Now, Erin did go down to a Category 3, but then it went back up to a Category 4, and they do believe that it will go ahead and return to Category 5 strength. Now, while Hurricane Erin is currently impacting Puerto Rico, weather meteorologists are saying that it will not make landfall to the eastern part of the United States. Now, while they are anyways saying how Erin will just go ahead and brush the east coast of the United States, there are more and more news reports saying that Erin is actually shifting more west. But who really knows, especially in a day and age where they play with the weather? Now, you might be saying, there he goes again, talking about weather manipulation, weather modification. Can't this just be a normal intensifying storm? And make no mistake about it, I'm not saying that Hurricane Erin is not a natural storm. All I'm saying is when they say that Hurricane Erin will not hit the eastern parts of the United States, I made multiple videos so far saying how it seems like in 2025, events keep repeating. This all started with the Washington, D.C. plane crash with the ice figure skaters, then the Texas floods, then the intentional fires set in Idaho, among other events also played out in the past. Well, Hurricane Erin is no different. The very first hurricane in 2025 is Hurricane Erin. The very first hurricane back in 2001 was also Hurricane Erin. Back on September 11th, 2001, there was a major hurricane, Hurricane Erin, which was a Category 3, scheduled to make landfall on New York. Yet for whatever reason, on that same exact day, a gust of wind just happened to blow Erin out to sea. Flights going into New York were now delayed and canceled due to this hurricane, yet for whatever reason, since Hurricane Erin was now going out to sea due to this gust of wind, there were clear skies. Flights were no longer delayed, flights were no longer canceled. Well, we know what happened later on that day. All thanks to a gust of wind at last minute changing the direction of the hurricane. So, I mean, again, are we going to see history repeat itself, but in a twisted way? Now Erin will make landfall thanks to a gust of wind. You never know. Times are very, very strange and weird. So I'm not trying to fearmonger here. Even though I am a horror channel, I do talk about the horrors of reality. It's always good to be stocked up and prepared for any surprising event, just like Hurricane Erin back in September 2001.
I remember that day very well. I was here at News 12 doing my evening weathercast and showing our viewers satellite images of a very powerful storm, a Category 3 hurricane, Hurricane Erin, which was moving on a track that would take it, perhaps the next day, right into the tri-state metropolitan area. Notice also the movement. It's moving toward the northwest. And if it were to keep on moving, it would be heading right toward Long Island and southern New England, but it's not going to do that. But then I pointed out that the cold front that was moving through our area would ultimately push Erin away from the East Coast. Will be turned around and moved to the north and northeast, out of the picture for us as this cold front comes on in and through, and for all intents and purposes, just boom, kicks Erin right on out to sea. I was actually happy to tell our viewers that we were going to dodge a major weather bullet, that the hurricane was going to veer away from the eastern seaboard, that September 11th was going to be a beautiful day, blue skies and bright sunshine. In retrospect, maybe it would have been better if we had to deal with the hurricane. The front moves through, less humid air moves in, and sunshine. You know, if that cold front had been just 24 to 36 hours slower than it was, the weather on 9/11 might have been much different than it turned out to be.
So you're probably saying to yourself, I'm not going to click that video. You're clearly clickbaiting here. Really? The end of women? You're trying to bait me. You're a baiter. But am I really baiting here? So what am I talking about? Well, multiple news agencies are talking about this, but I do want to focus on this news article right here, which was published by livemint.com on August 17th, 2025. This news article is titled, End of Women, Humanoid Robots to Give Birth to Live Babies Soon. All it costs is 12 lakh. The article continues to say scientists in China have claimed that the world's first humanoid robot surrogate could soon give birth to a live baby. The project led by this doctor here of Kuai Technology in Guangzhou aims to mimic pregnancy inside an artificial womb. The article continues to say the baby would grow inside the robot's body in a womb-like space filled with artificial amniotic fluid. Dr. Zhang is already in talks with Guangdong authorities to draft laws and rules for this technology. So let's go ahead and stop right there, because some people may be saying this is just China, it's only China. But best believe, if they are telling us about this now, what China is doing with these robots and these robotic baby births, which they're even calling the babies humanoids, best believe this has been going on for a long, long time in other countries, especially in the United States. I mean, it was only this year that I learned of organoid brains, which are pretty much human brains grown in a petri dish that are basically made to be the counterpart of AI. When these scientists are asked, are these organoid brains conscious? They'll say generally they're not conscious, which is not a hard no. But as more research continues, they do find out they do have some form of consciousness. They say they've been creating these organoid brains for more than a decade, so that means it's been going on for a lot longer than that. But going back to the news article from livemint.com, it says the baby will grow for 9 months and receive nutrients through a tube before birth. Dr. Zhang said the technology has reached a mature stage. Now it needs to be implanted in the robot's abdomen so that a real person and the robot can interact and achieve pregnancy, allowing the fetus to grow inside. So a prototype is expected to go on sale next year for around 100,000 yuan, which is about $13,000 in the United States. Reports say the humanoid can replicate the entire pregnancy journey from conception to delivery. Details of how fertilization actually happens remains unclear. Experts have not explained how a fetus will be implanted, but they claim that the idea is built on earlier experiments where a premature lamb survived in biobags for weeks. But like I said, you'll find multiple news articles and actual scientists from China not calling these babies babies or humans, but actual humanoids. And like I said, I 100% believe this, because this kind of confirms a quote unquote conspiracy that half these people that we see, especially on TV, celebrities and so forth, are artificial. They freeze or glitch on TV, or they do very odd things that you would not expect a normal human to do. So, like I said, this has been going on for a long time now, and they're using this news story from China as a way to give the truth in plain sight. Some are even saying that this could help infertility issues in many different countries. But if that was the case, then they would fix a lot of the problems with food that can cause fertility issues. And also, they would stop spraying things in the skies, in the airs, causing environmental hazards that can also lead to fertility issues as well. Like, for example, spraying Satan in the skies to dim the sunlight. So because they do not want to stop doing this, and also the so-called powers that be have said multiple times, especially in the World Economic Forum, where China is also a major player, that they do want to go ahead and lower the population. I mean, do you remember the Georgia Guidestones? They want a population of no more than 500 million. This is also something that has been echoed inside the World Economic Forum. So when it comes to these robots giving birth, or pregnant robots, there's definitely something else at play here. Governments around the world, they have been making human chimeras for quite some time now, human animal entities, and they've also been making human embryos without the need for eggs or sperm. Like, for example, this news article right here from Reuters, which was published on September 7th, 2023, Israeli scientists create model of human embryo without eggs or sperm.
This looks a lot like a human embryo, but it was created without sperm, eggs, or a womb. It was made in a lab by a group of scientists in Israel, and what they've created so far offers a new glimpse into the early stages of embryonic development. They've built a model that resembles an embryo at day 14 of human development, according to Professor Jacob Hanna at Israel's Weizmann Institute of Science.
What we did, we took human stem cells that were derived years ago from donated early embryos. And what we do this time is we put them in special media that takes them to really, really early stages. And again, in about 1% of the aggregates, we can see that cells start differentiating correctly, migrating and sorting themselves into the correct structure. And the farthest we could get is day 14 in human embryo development.
That's when an embryo acquires internal structures, but before it lays down the foundations for our organs.
And it really makes me wonder, in the case of any mass depopulation event, will these humanoids replace humans, these more controllable humanoids? Because I sometimes do think of the Deagle report and the mass depopulation, which now we are in 2025, but because that leaked, was that event moved to another date?
So the Deagle report is a report that was leaked on a website called Deagle.com. And what's interesting is Deagle.com is just military talk. It's a website about military weapons, military strategies, military everything. Then somebody said that somebody super high up in the agencies decided to leak this report to kind of warn people about something. And this was in 2017, and it circled the internet. Like, you know, conspiracy theorists were all over it. I was totally like into it. And then in 2020, it got wiped off the internet, like wiped off the internet. Like if you tried to upload it again, you would be flagged immediately. Right now it's back on the internet again, and I think it's floating around. If not, I have it saved on my phone. Let me just show you guys. So according to the Deagle report, the United Kingdom is set to be depopulated by 77.1% by this year. Ireland is supposed to be by 72.4% depopulated by this year. The United States, and then you've got Australia right here. Then you have, where's Canada? Oh, Canada's right there. You've got Israel right there. And it's just really interesting. But then there's also a growth of population in the same report. Let me just show you that. So we start tapering off here, and then it says Russia. Where's Russia? I had it somewhere. It was like 0.5% depopulation for Russia. So right there is Russia. And then what's interesting is you get to all of these countries, and they see a population growth from 2017 to 2025. And it seems like most of these countries, I'm not saying all, but most of these countries on here didn't push for the you-know-what in 2020. Now, what people also don't understand is that 2020 was actually supposed to happen between 2012 and 2016. So if you were really active in the conspiracy theory like stage, everybody knew that the was coming for Depop, right? And then they pretty much pushed it in 2020. And then I don't think it actually went as well as they thought it would, because I think they thought by 2025 they would have us completely in the 15-minute city digital prisons, and that they would have created havoc. Luckily for us, what they created, the didn't actually stick as well as it did when they released it in China at the military games, so that when everybody went home, they would actually transfer that, you know, virus to everybody else. So what they did is they went through with it with lies and algorithms that they got from like previous viruses that they used to release, like Zika and all of that other stuff. And so now I'm wondering, is the Deagle report also behind on time, just like their plan for the you-know-what, by maybe a decade? Because, I mean, AI is coming. There's way too many of us, and not many of us are going to have jobs. And that's a whole lot of issues for governments to just keep people sitting around eating uselessly.
But talking about experimentations, in one of my most recent videos, I had spoken about these rabbits in Colorado and other states that are growing these horns, these tentacles from their heads, their faces, and so forth. Now, as I said, I have never heard of this before, but those that are researching this further said this is something known as Shope papillomavirus. Supposedly, rabbits can transmit this to other rabbits, but they can't transmit it to humans or other animals like dogs. But they're still telling people do not go near these rabbits that have this virus. But now news is coming out that another animal that we see in our daily lives has some kind of Resident Evil type virus. Reading this article from the New York Post, which was published on August 17th, zombie squirrels covered in oozing warts spotted skulking through United States backyards. Now, once again, just like with the rabbits with the horns and tentacles, I have never seen squirrels looking like this before or even heard of something like this before. But because I have not heard of something before does not mean it's not real or hasn't happened. But continue to read the article. It says, the grotesque-looking gray squirrels photographed in states like Maine and across parts of Canada have appeared in recent months with oozing sores and hairless patches on their heads and limbs, the Daily Mail reported, citing a flurry of social media users spotting the critters on Reddit and X. Photos and reports of afflicted squirrels date back to mid-2023, but sightings have surged again this summer, the outlet said. This person from Reddit was quoted as saying, "At first I thought it was eating something from my front beds, but then I realized it was on its face." Now, again, these experts believe they know the answer. This part of the article right here says, some have dubbed the critters zombie squirrels, but wildlife experts claim the animals are likely suffering from squirrel fibromatosis, a viral skin disease caused by Lepori pox virus, the outlet reported. And like with the rabbits, the virus spreads through direct contact between healthy squirrels and the lesions or saliva of infected squirrels, mimicking herpes transmission in humans. But they also go on to say that these squirrels do not have any impact on humans or, again, other animals. It just goes from squirrel to squirrel. They also go on to say that this is something different from squirrel pox, which is more common in the United Kingdom. But like I said, they go on to have an explanation for this, but then they go on to say that this is something that has been seen as of recent, as of 2023. First thing I thought of after reading this story are all these GMO insects they are releasing on Nature. GMO mosquitoes, GMO flies, GMO spiders, and now they're talking about GMO ticks that can carry diseases that will have you allergic to all types of animal products. So is this some type of, again, some type of experimentation, and the animals are being impacted first? When it comes to censorship, privacy, and data, I saw this video clip on a channel called Barry Step, and it kind of blew my mind. No matter what you do with your phone, they're always collecting data.
Is learning about us throughout the day. So here's what we're going to do. We have two identical phones. The only difference between these two phones is this one is in airplane mode. Both of the phones lack a SIM card, and they haven't been set up to access any Wi-Fi networks. So for all intents and purposes, these phones have no connection to a data network. We're going to keep them with us throughout the day. And while I travel around DC, we're going to figure out just what Google is finding out about me. Our first stop, Sim's convenience store, just outside our Fox Bureau, for a quick coffee. From there, we took a walk to the Capitol and took a quick walk around the Senate office buildings, and then decided to hop in a car and head around town. Hello. To run our test, we had to do more than walk the block, so we took a tour around our nation's capital. First, Children's National Medical Center Hospital, then west to St. Albans School and the National Cathedral. The entire time, the phones had no access to the internet. Oh my goodness. Not a Wi-Fi connection and not any cellular data service. It almost seemed quaint to assume that Google wouldn't even be able to collect data on me. Let's head back to the Bureau, my friend. Google's business model is simple. Collect data on its users and then use that data to sell targeted ads. It's a business model called surveillance capitalism. But does that critical data collection work even when your phones aren't connected? So we're back here at our Fox Bureau in DC, and we've got both of our phones exactly how we left with them. Have stayed in my pocket for the entire day. So let's find out what they know. This is our man-in-the-middle device. It's basically a Wi-Fi network that these phones are going to connect to once we turn their Wi-Fi on. It's going to pass data through it on the way to Google. But on the way, we're actually going to get a copy of the same data that Google's going to get. We'll be able to decrypt it and then find out where we've been throughout the day. Within minutes, the numbers rolled in. The phone that wasn't on airplane mode registered more than 100 locations, 130 activities, and even 152 barometric readings. As soon as it hooked up to our Wi-Fi, it transmitted 300 kilobytes of data straight to Google. The phone even logged our exact locations, tracking us all around town, the Capitol, the hospital, the school, and the cathedral. The metadata has a time log down to the very second, tracking everything when they think that you're walking, riding, and yes, even getting out of the car. Okay, so you're thinking, this isn't a big deal. I'll just put my phone in airplane mode. Yeah, we thought of that too. This is the other phone that we had with us that no SIM card also remained in airplane mode the entire time. Let's see what kind of data it captured. The phone with airplane mode activated actually logged more locations and activities than the other phone, and it also transferred hundreds of kilobytes of data to Google as soon as it was activated. The only thing that's missing from this map is our stop at the Children's Hospital, but it still knows we were there. Through complicated user agreements and free software, Google gets users to sign away their privacy for nothing. Google is watching you.
And it's not even the phones, it's not even the Wi-Fi. They are even finding ways to track us in food.
Some conspiracy theories are true. For example, let's say you had a friend call you up and say, I was eating at a restaurant and I found a microchip in my food. I know because I told them to leave off the pepper, but I saw a single speck of pepper. But when I looked at it closely, it was perfectly square. And when I took it home and looked at it under a magnifying glass, it was a microchip. Before you have them institutionalized, know that sometimes cheese has microchips in it. Specifically, authentic Parmesan cheese from Italy has chips embedded in the cheese wheels because they have a huge issue with counterfeiting. These chips let them scan the wheels for authenticity and also track where they go. These microchips are edible by design, and you may have eaten one in your life. Likewise, let's say that same friend says their printer is encoding secret messages in documents, that they keep finding these microscopic specks that they thought were just flaws in the print head or something. But once again, when they looked at them under their magnifying glass, they found a pattern, and they're certain the pattern has meaning. What your friend has discovered are printer tracking dots. Many printers, we don't know which ones, use tiny, basically invisible dots. These identify the serial number of that printer and also the date and time when the document was printed. Printer manufacturers actually did this for 20 years in secret before the public found out in 2004. But for example, if documents were leaked from a government agency, these dots help them identify which printer they came from. Likewise, if you're using your printer for some sort of illegal counterfeiting activity, they can scan those nearly invisible dots and immediately know which machine did it and when. This is actually the frustrating thing about the fake conspiracy theories. Sometimes the reality is just as weird.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this channel and you want to see more, please subscribe. If you're already subscribed,
What's up, everybody? Is it just miserable hot where you're at right now to where you don't even want to go outside? I just checked and it looks like it is. I walked Ruckus about 30 minutes after dark last night and it was still miserable. Okay, so this is something I've seen a lot of online. It's been exactly 666 days from this event to the next one. And a lot of times when I check, it's not true. This time it's actually true. The October surprise, let's say, was exactly 666 days before the 9th of Av on the gray calendar. I just say grays around here if you're new. And just to be thorough, the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av, was August 2nd to 3rd. They start their day at sundown and go by a lunar calendar, which is confusing as hell if you've ever looked into it. But okay, what's the big deal about Tish B'Av, August 2nd? Well, this last one marked the first time a sitting Yeezy minister publicly led prayers on the Temple Mount, marking a highly symbolic moment because them praying there has been prohibited under the established status quo. But this year, a record 3,500 pilgrims ascended the Temple Mount. They didn't walk over there, they ascended, marking the highest attendance ever recorded for that day. And we'll get into the significance of that in a minute. Videos showed the worshipers singing, dancing, and praying openly at the site without police intervention. This represents a major shift in enforcement of historic rules that prohibited graves from worshiping there. Arabs somehow still control that area, and it's illegal under current laws, which that hasn't stopped them on anything else they want to do. But more importantly here, under their own laws, they are ritually impure and not able to worship on the Temple Mount. Unless, that's right, they cook Hashim a well-done steak. The whole purpose of this ceremony is to get the ashes, mix it with water, and then you can sprinkle it on people and purify them. And until you've been purified, Hashim won't hear your prayers on the Temple Mount. So does that mean that that sacrifice was legit and they now have the ashes of purification? Well, according to this dude that went on Timcast, it did happen, and he's got his little dealer stash of ashes right there. So this dude is Adam King. I couldn't actually find his account on X, but a few mentions of him. This is from January 11th, 24. He says he's a staunch America First person, but then he refers to Yeezy as us and we. Sounds like his allegiance actually lies in Yeezy. He's peacocking and LARPing with this American flag. And before I even saw this post, I had a serious LARPing vibe off of him when we get to what he said on Timcast. Another little clip describes him as a Kabbalist who says Christianity is absolutely fulfilling great prophecy.
Because this is coming. This is coming. And
the Torah is coming? Is that, are you holding up the Torah saying this is the blueprint, this is the script?
here will happen. What is written in here will happen. And if the wealth of the nations doesn't come from the nations and they don't run to the
Praise.
Jews and say, please, and fulfill this prophecy, it seems like they come willingly. So
As Noahides, right? As Esau, the older shall serve the brother Noahides.
also forbidden to give over 20% of your wealth.
So I'm not sure how that conversation jumped to 20% of your wealth, but I thought I'd do a little character building here. And this is who this guy is.
Yeah, do you have my tweet that I actually put on my... So I basically, what happened, if you want to go to the first slide first before we play the video, about a month ago on July 1st, there was an announcement that they were going to do a practice run of the red heifer. And prior to this, the media outrage that the Jews were going to go do this red heifer, you had like these lunatics like Stu Peters and others who were saying, this is going to usher in the Antichrist, blah, blah, blah. And it was like a real big media balagan. It was really a bad twist. So they said that and also the government wasn't going to let them. So what they did was they said, we're just going to do a practice one with one of the 5 disqualified cows. The government said, okay, whatever. They ended up going out, doing a real cow. One of the cow's name was Tikva. They made the offering, and it was a real offering. They did it all by the laws, and I have with me some of the ashes right here, red heifer ashes, it's pretty incredible. The red heifer, the last time that the red heifer was done was over 2,000 years ago. The first time it was done by Moses. The second time it was done by Ezra from the book in the Bible. And that shows you how long the ashes can last for. So a pure red heifer doesn't come about all the time. And in this generation, we had 21 of them that were born. Pure. They picked 7 to bring to Israel. And out of the 7, Israel only allowed them to have 5 brought in, and they've been sitting around just doing nothing because the media outrage has been so astronomical about it. But the red heifer people, they fooled everybody, and they successfully performed the ritual about a month ago. Now, in the ritual, you're supposed to have hyssop. I have also hyssop that is from the actual ritual, and also the red heifer ashes, and these get put into a clay jar and then sprinkled on people in a healing ritual, and it removes the impurity of death and allows for people to heal. So since this started, they have been sprinkling on people. There was a man with Alzheimer's who just started remembering everything, sight to the blind. There's some real miracles that have happened in the last month since this thing has gone down. But the ashes, just like I have a little bag, there was 10.5 gallons of ashes, and this is only a dime bag full. And these ashes have been disseminated. They're here to stay. They will never be found. So many people have them. And this little bag can power about 10,000 doses.
Okay, so he may be right. That may have been the real ceremony. What qualifies as legit varies widely depending on who you ask. But I'm calling BS on him having a little baggie of the authentic ashes here. I mean, I know we're talking about some of the most generous giving people on earth here, and these ashes being one of the rarest substances on earth now. There's only 10 gallons of it in the entire universe. And this D-list social media lionista got mailed an 8 ball of this stuff. That stuff's a million times rarer than gold. And well, let's not get into gold. So I'm not buying that. And even one of the guys on the panel kind of laughed when he said that. So he says you sprinkle this stuff on somebody and it removes the impurity of death and allows them to heal. And miracles have already taken place. Well, this is what it says in Numbers. He that toucheth the dead body of any man shall be unclean for 7 days. He shall purify himself with it on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, and then he can return to the camp. If he doesn't do this, then he shall not be clean. And whoever is unclean defileth the tabernacle of the Lord and shall be cut off from the camp. So this has nothing to do with spiritual purity or miracle healings. It's an interdimensional Lysol. Yahweh can't be around yeast, and you can't be bringing any germs into the camp. Yahweh insists that all burnt offerings be without blemish, and that they come in and sprinkle blood on the altar before the sacrifice, which really makes me think that Yahweh's breaking out a microscope and checking the blood before eating dinner. Long story. But it actually makes zero sense that they would have mailed ashes to this guy in America. Well, I guess he's claiming that so many people have it now that you'll never find all of it. But here's the deal is these ashes serve absolutely no other purpose other than purifying to be within the camp, there in the physical place. So I'm not buying his miracle healings or those being authentic ashes.
Of the actual ceremony being taken place, and that's tikva, and everything was done specifically according to halacha, which is Jewish law. It was a perfect cow, and meaning that it doesn't have a single hair that is not red. And also it could never have been burdened with work. So you can't even lean a shovel up against the cow. They have to be treated in a very specific way for their whole life. And then the person who does the ritual can never have been in contact with death. So basically they're not allowed to they have to be of a specific bloodline. And what they do was they raise these children in like these elevated homes above the ground, and they never leave the home until they're ready to do the rituals. And that's like how they never come into contact with death. So the priest who did this literally lived in his home for over 20 years before he...
Never left?
Nope. Because he was born to do this ritual.
Wow.
And now that it's been done, the Messiah can come.
So actually, these children were raised in a compound that's dug into bedrocks so that there's no chance of there being a grave underneath. And then to transport them to the site of the sacrifice, they're supposed to sit on top of a wide board on top of a bull. And the wide cavity of the ribs of the bull together with the board on top would block impurity. It's amazing how they come up with these things. This is directly from the Temple Institute's website. And, you know, the fact that I know more about this than he does doesn't bode well for those being authentic ashes, but whatever. So anyway, in order to pray up on the mount, you're supposed to have these ashes for purification, and 3,500 people went up there on the 9th of Av. So I don't know. It sounds like they probably think that was a legit ceremony. I'll say this, if they do build the third temple and Yahweh does return, everybody's going to trip out when a big pillar of smoke and fire comes descending out of the sky. They're also putting up signs all around the city pointing the way towards the third temple. If you thought tensions were high over there now, just wait till they start trying to build that thing. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll catch you on the next one. Static out.
Coffee.
Astronomical about it.